Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Tailosive EV, live on YouTube with fists swinging. I'm fed up. I've been seeing so much discussion about this over the years, and I think I've even done videos on it in the past, but it's been a while. But at Investor Day, there was this image that's for the thumbnail of this live stream. Hopefully you saw it. I guess I could cue it up real quick. Basically, at Investor Day, they had a slide dedicated to do cool stuff. Let's say they used a different word that started with an S, but a lot of people thought that Tesla was unveiling some kind of wireless charger because we saw this really cool I don't really know what this is. I'm more interested in whatever this is. It's like a wall connector slash power wall put together or something. But because there's this pad at the bottom, a lot of people were assuming this must be some kind of wireless charger that's in development. And I've been talking about for years why I think this is a bad idea, but I think that a lot of people probably weren't watching at the time. But it's not just one simple problem, right? So people in the chat already are addressing what I think one of the problems are by saying that, okay, there's other startups, there's other companies like Witricity that has figured out how to make it more efficient. Okay, that's great, but there's still always going to be some form of losses. Particularly with induction charging, which is probably the better term. Wireless charging is weird because you still need wiring and additional cabling and stuff to get the charger to work in the first place. So wireless is kind of a... Plus, we don't really call it the Tesla wire, we call it... should be cableless charging or whatever. But my main issue with it is more on all of the extra parts and additional wiring and additional complexity that needs to be on the vehicles themselves, and the fact that we're already getting pretty far along in this EV adoption, excuse me, and we can't even agree on a charge port. I think NACS is clearly superior. It's smaller. It supports higher peak speeds. It can do vehicle to grid, vehicle to load, vehicle to home. It's got an internal lock, and yet most of the industry is still stuck on CCS. And there is not really anything, from what I can tell. I've been looking around for a while, and we were talking about wireless charging EVs back when I first started this channel, I think in 2019. I remember talking about it. It's been 4 years and it's still in the startup development phase of, well, it's possible and we've tested it and we've done it in labs, or we've jerry-rigged a prototype vehicle and we wirelessly charged it. So clearly the tech is possible, right? But my point is the inductive charging won't be as efficient in more variable use cases. For example, the bottom of cars is typically how you got to wirelessly charge it. These are not inherently good places for coils to be. They pick up lots of wet, water when it's raining, and they pick up lots of snow. They pick up mud. They pick up debris as the car's driving around, and that can interact with the efficiency of the inductive coils. And not even to mention that we can't get EV makers to agree on a charge port. Now we have to expect them to agree, excuse me, on some kind of inductive charging standard, which there hasn't been introduced on any mass vehicle. And that's why I think that it's so incompatible. Like, it's the opposite of backwards compatible. Whereas I understand the mindset, okay? Like, I'm willing to admit that the concept of just being able to park in a parking space or pull into your garage and you don't have to plug the car in, you just get out and it's already charging. I get it. That's cool. I like the concept. I like the simplicity of it, where you just don't even have to interact with a cable. That's part of the reason I'm such a big fan of Aptera, is because you wouldn't even have to plug it in. But for one, the Aptera is just more plug and play. It's got solar cells on it. You just leave it in the sunlight and it charges. This is something that is going to require so much more setup and so much more additional equipment to get work. Right now, most people are not even... Sorry, the bit rate's kind of all over the place. I know I look kind of compressed. I should probably close some background apps just in case. I don't know. My internet's been acting weird as of late. I apologize. But yeah, like the concept of just the car being able to plug in without you having to grab a cable. Yeah, I think the Aptera is closer to wireless charging because it's just charging itself. I agree with Mike that the snake charger is the better solution, and I don't think it necessarily needs to be exactly like that prototype Tesla unveiled all those years ago. I think there's probably a more streamlined, simplified way of doing it. Even something that you could mount to your garage wall, just like how we currently mount wall connectors in our garages. If they just had little robotic arm that could just have a little bit of wiggle room to be able to move side to side and then go outward towards the connector and plug itself in with a camera on it, vision-based neural net training, right? A camera, right now, they're trying to get it to replicate ultrasonic sensors, and it's not going all that well. But maybe if it was just as simple as look for charge port door, look for the little charge light next to the port, and then the little robotic arm lines itself up and plugs in. To me, that would be 100% more efficient, less complex, and it wouldn't require any additional hardware to go on the car. You know, a lot of the issues facing EV adoption right now that I try to remind people about is it's not necessarily all about the main problem is not necessarily desirability. I think that's where I take issue with the wireless charging EVs, and I've seen startups and stuff talk about how this is something that all EVs are going to need. It implies that the problem with electric vehicles is the demand. It's implying that we can't get enough people to buy electric vehicles. So the solution is to introduce more features and newer tech and cooler tech that makes it easier to own an EV, and then we'll convince more people to buy them. I don't think that's it. I personally don't think, unless you're Lucid, there's not a demand problem with electric vehicles. The problem is supply. The problem is how many can you build and how affordable can you make them. I can't tell you how many times I've shown people the Tesla Model 3 we bought or talked to them about EVs, and they love them. They think they're really cool, and they can even get by with the lower range and stuff, but the biggest hurdle for so many of my friends and family members is, wait, how much is it? Oh man, even with the federal tax credit and stuff, $35,000. You know, there's a lot of people that we probably ignore in the EV space a lot when we're like, oh yeah, Tesla is one of the cheapest cars in the world when you factor in cost of ownership and stuff. It's like, there's still a huge chunk of people out there that are buying cars used, that are not buying them new, you know, and they're buying them secondhand for, you know, sub $15,000, sub $10,000. You know, my first car was sub $4,000, and there's a huge demographic of people that are just spending a couple grand on cars. And the reason that there are cars out there with, you know, decent range that you can get by with gas cars is because there's so many available. It's because we've had decades and decades to mass produce them and iron out that manufacturing process. And that's kind of the process that Tesla and others are leading towards: increasing availability, increasing supply. And this wireless charging thing of, well, now I don't have to plug it in, that is completely taking EVs, in my opinion, in the wrong direction. It is making them more complex, adding more parts, adding more processes. You're going to have to add more wiring directly to the battery pack, which right now all of our EVs only have to have one because there's one connector. There's pretty much only one way to charge the battery. Now you want to suggest having two different ways to charge the battery. Not to mention, we typically fill the bottom of EVs with these big giant battery packs to have the center of gravity very, very low. And then you've got that shield at the bottom. To start cramming in more cabling and inductive cables at a massive scale on the bottom implies that, okay, for one, it's going to get hot down there, so you're going to have to, there's already cooling systems in place down there, but you're going to have to make sure that can stay cool when it's hot and it's like 110 degrees out, and you're trying to wirelessly charge your EV, and the battery pack is hot. There's got to be more cooling systems put in place for that inductive charger. And on that bottom of the car, you're going to be pushing the battery cells further up into the interior in order to incorporate this into a design that is scalable, which is why I think that inductive charging for EVs has always been, in theory, it's kind of cool, or in theory, we can get efficiency pretty good, but no one has incorporated it at scale. Because first of all, Ford has showcased this, Rivian has showcased this, Lucid has showcased this. It is very difficult to build EVs profitably. Extremely difficult to build them at a low enough price and be able to charge enough for them to get people to actually want to pay for them, and that's why Tesla's removing things left and right. Sometimes on a lot of cases, they're removing things prematurely. Like, there's still a lot of things they took out of the Tesla that I wish it had, whether it be the radar or the accessibility handles, or now they're getting rid of the ultrasonic sensors, which is causing all these problems for park assist. And still, even though they removed those sensors back in October, they haven't rolled out a replacement for Tesla Vision only Auto Park. They haven't rolled that out for Smart Summon or Summon. All they've added is park assist, and so far the people testing it are not too impressed. I mean, sometimes it does okay, other times it just crashes, other times it takes 10 seconds or whatever to boot up, whereas the ultrasonic sensor vehicles, park assist shows up immediately. So the concept that, well, we need to add more, we need to add this other option so that people can spend $2,000 on this home wireless charging setup, and I'm like, no. I'm sorry, as someone that's been driving an EV for the past few months, the concept of getting out of the car, grabbing a cord, and plugging it in, I personally don't find that annoying. I don't find that very stressful. Like, I don't find that a big, complicated step. To me, it's like right there. It's on the outside of the car. It's like you're passing by it. It's not the same thing as phones, which are, in our pockets, and we use them in bed. We use them in the living room. We take them around with us. So yeah, that's why earlier I disagree with the saying that wireless charging on phones is stupid. I personally pretty much exclusively charge my phone wirelessly, but my phone is very, very different from my car. I know they both have batteries and displays, but that doesn't make them the same thing at all. For one, our phone is using about 1,000th of energy compared to our car. So the energy losses with a phone are minuscule compared to the wireless charging losses of a car. Even if they say it's 90% efficient, that stacks up to hundreds and hundreds of kilowatt hours over the life of the vehicle that you're paying extra for, extra energy that's being lost to heat, extra energy that's got to go towards cooling, plus extra money that you have to spend towards including all of this additional equipment in the car. So I'm not in favor of making EVs more complicated, essentially, which is what this would require. For the sake of, well, that'll increase demand, or more people will buy EVs if they don't have to take the 2 seconds to grab the cord and plug them in. The point is, most of the time when, I would say the most traditional, lifestyle approach with vehicles is you drive it to work, you drive it back, and then it parks in your garage. And when you get home, you grab the cable, you plug it in, and then you go inside, you have dinner, watch a movie, go to bed. It's not as regular of a cord plug in and then disconnect and then plug in. It's not as regular as a thing as it is with our phones, because our phones are not parked in the same place for hours and hours a day, whereas our cars tend to be parked in 1 or 2 places on average most of the day. So I personally just think that this is, there's a reason essentially no one has incorporated it. No startup, no existing automaker. And I think it's probably going to stay that way. Having a snake charger is definitely the better way to go if you're just in a situation where, okay, we can't plug it in. Let's see. Wirelessly charging, especially in my Tesla. I love it for my phone, but you're not going to be able to easily add that to existing vehicles, which means every EV on the road now would immediately, from the get-go, if you tried to introduce wireless charging, all of these other vehicles, these millions of EVs on the road, would not work with existing hardware. They would need to be retrofitted, which would be more costly and time-consuming, or because it's so costly and time-consuming, people just wouldn't do it. Tesla Short says, my thought is it's for the robo-taxis. They park on them 10 minutes after every trip. I still think that there's a solution to that involves less complexity. The whole point of the robo-taxis is try to get the vehicle as cheap as possible. So adding in these extra coils and extra cooling systems and additional ways of charging it, and at every single supercharger that the robo-taxis are serving, you got to add additional wireless charging equipment. I don't think that's the right way of going about it. I think the simplest approach would just be to add an existing little snake arm wherever you're charging those things, which I guess that's still going to be additional equipment regardless. But over time, I think that will still be objectively cheaper than an inductive coil, just because you have to either put it into the ground or buy additional wiring, and you have to beef up the wiring a bit because there's going to be some losses around the charging way. I like charging my phone in my Tesla. I don't want wireless charging the Tesla. Let's see. In its infancy, induction charging as efficient as a level 2 charger. It's going to get better, cheaper, and easier to implement. That's just how technology evolves. I disagree, and Elon has directly commented on that. Not on the wireless charging thing, but there's this misconception, Rich, that a lot of people have, which is just that all technology magically somehow just becomes cheaper and becomes more affordable for no apparent reason, which is not true. It can get cheaper and more affordable and easier to implement, but that only happens when there is a large amount of demand for it. And there's a huge amount. That's why smartphones have gotten so affordable and so easy to build and cheaper to build, is because there's a ton of people buying smartphones. I don't think there's going to be a ton of demand or a huge influx in orders for any electric vehicle that incorporates wireless charging because they're basically starting from scratch. There's essentially nothing on the market right now that supports it. The additional equipment you would have to buy for your garage or house in order to get it to work. And again, I'm still skeptical of the claims. I haven't seen it tested in real life. I've seen startups claim that they can make a custom EV that accepts a wireless charge, but they're not putting it through real world use cases. They're just putting it in their perfectly set up and advertiser friendly test where they go, okay, see, we put it there and then we drove over it. It's like, okay, let's see how it performs when it's really, really hot out. Let's see how it performs when it's been driving through the snow. Let's see how it performs when it's been driving through the mud. And then has that been scaled at all? Have you been building those things at high volume? Have you been delivering them? I think that's just objectively going to cost more than a simple charge port. Personally, I think that's what the future is. I don't think it's really going to be snake chargers everywhere. I think that could be like a luxury feature for those who have the extra cash, but I don't think it's going to be cheap either way, whether you want wireless charging or you want the snake charger. But the vast majority of EVs are going to be the ones that are focused on being cost effective, focused on reducing parts, reducing complexity, taking out things that didn't need to be there. And that's the whole point of robotaxis, to figure out how cheap to get these things. So adding in all these extra parts and complexities, I don't think is the right way to go about it. If you need something to charge the EV without a person there, having a few actuators on an arm, in my head, is just so much more technologically simple than the big coils in the car and coils in the ground or in the charge mats that you have to set up and make sure, doesn't get messed with or doesn't get covered with leaves and that kind of thing. Alpha's hot take: robotaxis isn't going to make a big impact on transportation. I think I kind of agree with you on that. I think that people are oversimplifying how complicated robotaxis are. At least Tesla is. But, to be fair, there's already robotaxis in San Francisco and Chandler, Arizona, and I think several cities in China have robotaxis. But yeah, they're not, in my opinion, they're not making a huge impact on transportation. I mean, it's kind of a nice alternative form of public transport. That's kind of cool, but a lot of people, especially Tesla bulls, have this mindset that once you have robotaxis, then people stop buying cars, and I don't see that personally. You would need a pad that either comes up to get close to the battery pack or something on the car that comes down. EV trucks would sit even higher. That's true. As there's more and more SUVs and more trucks and people wanting that higher ground clearance, that would make it more and more difficult for the wireless charging to stay efficient. Again, it's one thing to report it on paper that, yeah, it's just as efficient, and then it's another thing to actually test it in the real world. And just knowing fundamentally how the magnetic coils are giving off a charge, and in the smartphone world, you're very, very lucky to get 25% loss. That's awesome if you only have 25% energy loss. Typically, it's more like, 30% or 40% energy loss for wireless charging. And there's startups that are claiming they can get it to 92, 96. I'm skeptical just because phones are way, way closer. They're like glass, nothing on it, and then you can snap it right to a wireless charger, and they can, like, our MagSafe connections and stuff are literally perfectly aligned every single time, like microns away from the wireless charging tech in the phone, and there's still like 25% losses. So when a car has much greater distances and a lot more variability with debris and mud and ice and everything that builds up under the car, I have a lot harder time believing that they can hit those efficiency numbers, at least at scale, and making sure that the car parks exactly in the right place every single time. When they're misaligned a little bit, there tends to be more losses. Essentially, like, there's people that can argue with me on this, but I would love to, if you disagree, tell me why you think it hasn't been implemented yet. Why has Tesla not incorporated it? Why has no startup incorporated it? Why has no legacy automaker incorporated it? After all these years of the tech being available, because I remember reading about these startups that were trying to get it standardized and testing it internally for years and years and years, and it's still not out. There's no EV really that supports it, and it's just all theoretical. It's all just, well, one day we'll have that. I'm like, why are we waiting? What's the holdup? You need to put a timescale on things you say won't happen, because never is kind of a long time. I'll say I mean, I wouldn't be shocked, I guess, if wireless charging for EVs becomes like available to the market, but I don't think that makes it the future. I guess I feel the same way about robotaxis, right? There are cars that drive themselves, and that they've actually existed for several years. But has that become like the primary form of transportation for a lot of people? Has that stopped people from buying cars? I don't think so. It's just kind of a cool R&D project. So, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe a Lucid or Faraday Future or whoever, like a luxury startup company that's selling $90,000+ cars, incorporates some form of wireless charging. But I'm not saying it will never happen. I'm just saying it won't be the mainstream. I think it'll be like an exclusive, very, very high-end option, but I'm still going to argue that it's dumb because I personally think that the energy losses will be worse than the startups are claiming they're going to be because they're not testing it with real-world vehicles that are driving around and getting dirty and getting wet and everything. Yeah, it's like I feel the same way exactly about battery swapping. That was a concept before NIO did it, and they said, yeah, what would make sense is if you could go to a station and they just pull out your dead battery or your low charge battery, put in a fully charged one, and then instead of charging for 20 or 30 minutes, you only have to take 4 minutes or 3 minutes to just pop a new battery in there, and now you got a full charge. Okay, they do that. There are battery swapping stations both in Asia and in Europe. But is that where everything's headed? Is that where most cars are going? I don't think so. Personally, I think it's basically just NIO. And Tesla even experimented with it in the early days. They had a demonstration where they showcased how they could swap a battery on a Model S really quickly. But they realized over time that, wait a minute, the limiting factor preventing EV adoption is the availability of batteries. And battery swapping stations require there to be more battery packs than there are cars. You have to have battery packs at the ready, fully charged, sitting around waiting for people to come swap them out. And that just eats into the cost of the swapping station. Like the NIO battery swapping stations, I'm pretty sure like 10 times the price of just a DC fast charging station. And with the increased speed of fast charging, with a lot of Teslas and other EVs supporting 250 kilowatts, some go up to 270, some are even hitting 350. Cybertruck will probably break 350 with its 1000 volt architecture and everything. We're getting to the point where you can fast charge a battery so quickly that the advantages of a swapping station are kind of minuscule. It's like it saves you 5 minutes, and it's kind of scary because I've watched videos of people that go through those swapping stations and, the whole car has to shut off. Like the AC stops working and it gets hot really quickly and you're hearing all these noises and screws and making all this noise. Or you got to get out of the car if it's raining or something, you're wet. And the other problem with swapping stations is they pretty much can only do one car at a time. And they're not small. They take up the space of about, 20 or 15 DC fast chargers. But they can only service one car at a time. So when it's rush hour and you got a lot of cars trying to swap their battery packs, there's actually a line forming. And people are trying to get their battery swapped and it's taking a while, opposed to DC fast charging. 15, 20 cars can all plug in simultaneously. And if it's a V3 or V4 supercharger, they can all pretty much hit their peak speeds. So over time, the logistics of it just ended up not making sense. And I feel very, very similarly about the wireless charging technique. Is that, okay, it can be done, and I'm not saying it will never be done. I'm just saying it won't be done at any meaningful scale. Like maybe it'll be done by 1 or 2 kind of niche vehicles. I don't think it will be done on the scale of like Model 3 selling at hundreds of thousands of cars a year, Model Y selling at millions. I don't think that it will be adopted at scale, basically. I think that it would be like a niche luxury thing. I would think battery swapping would hamper NIO's ability to improve the designs of their batteries. That's that's a good point too. Yeah, you can't change your battery pack design too much because you have to make sure it's always swappable with the previous generation. Ivan says, at some point you start running into physics regarding wireless charging. That's why I'm so skeptical of all the reports, just because I'm not really seeing that much testing of it going on in the field. I'm just seeing them say that we can hit 90% efficiency. And I'm like, okay, but there's fundamental ways the way inductive charging works. And the more you want to okay, there's something that pops up at the bottom and makes contact with the car, okay, you're adding parts, you're adding complexity. More moving parts are more things that can go wrong. And all of it is going to require additional manufacturing methods. And of course, who's leading the EV charge right now is Tesla. And they're removing things as basic as ultrasonic sensors, which are not really that expensive. I think they save like $100 per car. Like they're saving $100 for a $40,000 car, $50,000 car. They took them out because they cost like $100. And people are saying, oh no, we got to start incorporating these big wireless charging coils, or we're going to put pins in the bottom and then have this thing that pops up in the garage that meets it and connects it. And I'm like, it's just so much additional complexity, making sure those pins get aligned just right every single time. As unreliable and as sketchy as so many robot cleaning vacuums have been. I'd love robotaxis to be a thing when I'm too old to drive, or at least get my FSD to be good enough. I like the idea of self-driving car. I don't like the idea of a robotaxi, though, which is what I mean by that is like, I would like to own my own car that I know is mine. It's the color I want. It's the size I want. It's the efficiency I want. It's got the storage space I like, that I can get in it and I can tell it where I want to go and it just drives me there. I like that. And I like the concept of like, I can do something else. I can go on my phone, or I can watch a movie. I could go to sleep and the car's doing the driving. But what I don't like about the robotaxi concept is it implies that there will always be a taxi nearby for me to call. And it implies that I'm not going to have a choice on what the price of the ride is. That's already a thing with Uber and Lyft riding right now, is like, if the cars are, if the Uber and Lyfts are experiencing like high traffic, like there's an event going on, or it's just busy because it's the morning and everyone's trying to go to work, or it's the evening and everyone's going to dinner or something, it creates this influx. So there's surge pricing. The price can go up at any time. Whereas the car in my garage right now, the price to drive that doesn't fluctuate all that much. Maybe supercharging fees could go up and down. But for the most part, we're charging from home, and your utility is less likely to fluctuate electricity pricing as much as, ride hailing is. So the price of riding with an Uber or Lyft constantly is going to be fluctuating perpetually based on how many people are riding in them right now. And if it's really busy, you might have to wait longer. That's part of the reason I'm such a big fan of Aptera, is because I like the concept of individuality, people getting to own their car the way they want it. Despite what I said in yesterday's video about the Cybertruck and everything, like, people should be able to buy whatever they want to buy. I may critique it and I may be concerned about it and say, well, I think, yeah, I'm still going to express concern if anybody buys a car that I don't think they need or can afford. I support their freedom to make that wrong decision, but I'm still gonna be worried about it. But still, people like to buy and own their own vehicle and know that it's theirs and it's available, and that, like, in an emergency, like, oh crap, I gotta go, or someone needs me, like my grandma, needs help or something. I like knowing that if I was called and someone needed me quickly, I could run out there in a couple seconds, get in my car, and start moving. Opposed to, oh wait, hold on, I gotta hail the robotaxi. Oh wait, there's an event going on. They're all busy right now. I have to wait 20 minutes for my ride to get here. Oh crap, now I gotta wait. Or maybe I gotta pay extra to get the robotaxi to prioritize me or something like that. So that the reason I support Aptera is because I share that same view set that so many people have on public transport and robotaxis of, yes, we need better efficiency. We need more, vehicles consuming less energy per mile, and we want them to be environmentally conscious, and we want them to have a good amount of utility. But at the same time, I like the idea of being able to own your own vehicle. And I think most of the country honestly thinks that way. I think that it's easy to imagine a situation where I'm like, oh yeah, robotaxi is cheaper. Just take the robotaxi. You don't need to own a car anymore. But I think that oversimplifies the scenario. The complexity of putting in a car seat, the complexity of, well, we want to move 7 people right now, and most of the robotaxis can only sit 5. So we're going to have to get 2 robotaxis, or we're going to have to hail a special robotaxi with the additional seats. Or you get in a robotaxi and it was thrashed by the last person. It's stinky. It's got vomit in it or something. And just public transportation tends to get treated worse than things you lock and protect and you own yourself. Can we please quit saying the Cybertruck will charge faster because of the 1,000-volt architecture? It would charge faster because it has a bigger battery. 1,000-volt just makes the connectors cheaper. Well, that's partially true, but the higher voltage does have an impact on how little amps you have to put into it. If you have a higher voltage, you don't have to run as many amps to charge it faster. It also can improve your charging curve because if you're not running as many amps, the cables don't get as hot. So it will charge faster, but it's not just because of the 1,000 volts. I agree, but there is a factor in that. There's a reason the Lucid Air can charge faster than the Model S. It's not CCS. CCS has a lower peak speed than NACS. But why can the Lucid charge faster? Is it because it's just 18 kilowatt hours more than a Model S? No, that's not really a big difference. The difference is the Lucid is a much higher voltage architecture. So when it can plug into an Electrify America station, doesn't need to pull as many amps in order to hit those 350 kilowatt speeds. It's a shame Lucid's having so much demand problems, though. Yeah, they're laying off people and stuff. By the time robotaxis actually exist, I think wireless charging will exist and be useful around 2030. Okay, well, I'll disagree with that, Joel. You might be right, I might be wrong. That's totally possible. But I'm willing to bet that wireless charging will not be used at scale in 7 years. Keep trying to remind people that. People always refer to 2030 as like, oh, that's a far off, great distance year. That's 7 years from now. 7 years ago was 2016. 7 years ago, the Model 3 was unveiled. Okay, so just think of everything that's changed since the Model 3 has unveiled. And now apply another 7 years. You think wireless charging and robotaxis could be a mainstream everyday thing? They're just all over the place. I disagree. We'll see. I think the Snake Charger just has far too many financial benefits, especially because Tesla has already tried to sell people on full self-driving for the concept of, you can buy FSD today. And, you know, they were saying that back in 2017, 2018. In 2017, they were telling people, you can buy full self-driving today, and that will make your car a robotaxi later that can go out and make you money. Those cars aren't going to have wireless charging hardware. And I doubt Tesla or anybody's going to offer retrofits for cars that old. So you can access, again, I don't personally think robotaxis are on the brink. I don't think we're about to crack that code and start mass deployment of them personally. But I do think that if your mindset was to incorporate more ease of charge, or honestly, it would probably, I was thinking about this too. Other people have brought up points of like, oh, including myself, what happens if someone rides in a robotaxi and then they get out of the car and they just walk away and they don't shut the door? You can send a push notification to their phone that says, hey, you left the door open, you better go close it, or we're going to charge you fees. So that encourages you to go close the door. Or my other thought was, if you're riding in a robotaxi and your destination is somewhat close by to a supercharger or to a charging location of any kind, they could give you a discount. Just like there's idle fees, there could be benevolence, perks where they say like, hey, do you mind walking a little bit further to get to your grocery store, to get to your location, if you just plug this car in? That way the rider can get out and plug the car in, and then they get a free ride or they get a discounted ride. So there's like financial incentive for them to take care of it. Or they say, if you just get a push notification while you're at the grocery store that says, hey, there's 5 robotaxis that are stopped at the nearby supercharger. Can you walk over there, plug all of them in, and we'll give you a $50 credit, or we'll give you a $10 credit, whatever I haven't done the numbers in my head of what would be profitable and what would be, incentivizing enough. But to give people incentives to help fill in the gap, I think would be far cheaper than putting in all this additional equipment and having to add all these additional coils underneath the car and more cooling systems and all that. Matt Zero says, I give robotaxi mass adoption another 50 plus years. Wow, 50. That's a long time. Yeah, I think it's almost impossible to predict. It's already hard to predict what's going to happen in the next 5 to 7 years. It's practically impossible. I mean, look at all the predictions people made about the future 50 years ago and how inaccurate most of it was. Most people's thoughts of what the 2020s would be like is wrong on so many levels. They thought flying cars would be a thing, or they thought space travel would go further. They had no idea about the adoption or mass deployment of smartphones and information and internet speeds. And, there wasn't even really an internet a real internet. I know there was a limited forms of it, but there wasn't like a consumer grade internet 50 years ago. So much has changed because of technologies that we didn't foresee. And I personally don't think wireless charging is one of those big, untapped potential things like, oh, we need to get this on more EV. Getting out of the car and plugging in the cable, I'm sorry, that takes maybe 20 seconds out of my day, in the idea of adding all this complexity, all this wiring, all this expense, and all of these heat causing charging techniques, and all of this beefed up home charging equipment, which most people already are not buying the wall connector. It's cool for people who do, but most of the people I talk to, and we've ran polls on this, Tesla Scope ran polls on this, the most common form of charging an EV is using the cable that came with the car, which is the mobile connector. A lot of people are just plugging into the 110 outlet, or they're like me, plugging into a higher amperage outlet, and they just trickle charge because it was cheap and it was simple. Wireless charging incorporation, I do not believe will be cheap. I want more vehicles like the Model 3 and the Ioniq 6. Sedans are awesome for efficiency. Yeah, I mean, I like the look. Personally, I like the look of the Ioniq 6, but I watched a walkthrough video of it today, and the software is still, unfortunately, very disappointing. Like the in-route planning and just the UI feels very dated. So I like the range and the efficiency of the Ioniq 6. I like the engineering of it, but the infotainment, I think, could definitely use a whole fundamental rewrite. Maybe it just needs CarPlay too or something. I don't know. Ivan says, did you see Rivian now shows Tesla superchargers with Magic Dock? Yeah, I did. I thought that was great. I'm still kind of disappointed. Well, let me look here. I haven't looked in a couple days. I'm a bit disappointed by how few Magic Docks there are. Like when they launched it, there were 10. And my thought process was, well, over time, we're going to need more of these slowly rolled out. And I thought the purpose of putting Magic Docks at, V3 locations was that they were fairly simple, that you didn't have to replace the entire cable. The cable could stay. You're just replacing the little brick that holds the cable with an adapter. So I was like, that's such a small little package. They could ship that to service centers all across the country and give them a step-by-step guide on how to convert an existing supercharger into a Magic Dock charger. And I would have thought that based on the White House's comments that they were going to have like 7,500 charging stalls available to non-Teslas by the end of next year. I would have thought that at least every day or every couple days we would get updates on new ones opening up. And yeah, I'm checking right now in the charger non-Tesla section. It's pretty much just the same 10. There's still 10 chargers with Magic Docks, which on the scope of an entire country, that's not very much. There's a bunch in the Northeast. Those were the same ones that were there when we started, but they really haven't been adding to it. So I'm glad that I'm glad that Rivian incorporated support for it. That's great for their customers. Honestly, I think of all companies in software development for in-car entertainment or the infotainment and everything, Rivian is probably second based on the ownership videos I've watched. I think Tesla is still in the lead, which is funny because I still complain about Tesla software a lot. But as far as all other vehicles I've messed around with, everything feels fairly dated. Everything feels very early 2000s in regards to in-car software. Tesla doesn't feel futuristic to me. Tesla just feels modern. Like the display and the software in the car feels about on par with my phone or my laptop software. And the closest I could see to Tesla is about Rivian, but there's still a bit of a gap with things that they haven't incorporated into. Were you jealous, Jerry? Everything got access to an Aptera for a video since you've been giving them so much free promotion. I get his channel is bigger, but you've done more for them. Well, no, I'm not jealous because we did talk off the record with the CEO after we finished our interview. We did talk about doing an in-person collaboration where I would get to ride along in an Aptera prototype, but they told me they were up for meeting up and doing the Gamma prototype, which Jerry Rig Everything did not get to check out because Gamma is still in Europe, or I think it's on its way back, or no, they told me that Gamma would be back from Europe near the end of March. So we're getting closer to when. We haven't scheduled a date yet. I'm sure Aptera's got a lot of stuff going on, so they're probably very busy. I don't expect them to make a bunch of time for me. But I do think there's a decent chance at some point this year we'll get to check out the Gamma prototype, which is the one that has working solar and, a more Delta-esque, production-ready interior. Whereas the ones Jerry Rig was driving were very alpha prototype, like fairly early, and the beta prototype, which doesn't, it has a bunch of production-grade stuff, but it's still like bare bones. It doesn't look anything like the production model. So I loved his video. I thought it was really cool. And I was just personally really happy to see Aptera get so much praise and so much attention from such a big channel. Because I feel like they're amazing and I think they're the coolest startup in the world, but not enough people talk about them. So I'm always telling my friends and family members about them, trying to get people excited. So to see a channel that has millions of subscribers be able to promote it and talk about it, that got me excited. I was just like, yes, okay, we got him on board. This is great. So I was really happy to see Aptera get some more credit from the big guys. I interviewed MKBHD, I think 2 years ago or a year ago, and I asked him on the podcast that I had him on if he had heard of Aptera. I was trying to get Aptera on his radar. I was like, hey, Marquez, I know you're checking out a lot of vehicles. Have you thought about the Aptera? And he was, rightfully skeptical of it. He was just like, well, there's so many startups and you can't trust them all and they all have these crazy claims and you can't believe them. And, he's right to a certain extent. You can't trust just anything. And in the same way that I'm skeptical of the wireless charging startups that have yet to deliver really working, functional products, or, there's not like an easy way. You can't just retrofit a wireless charger on an existing EV. It's very complicated to get it to tap into the battery pack, and right now Teslas are basically designed to not let the car go and drive if it's charging, because there's pretty much only one way to charge it. So, I think that I was not jealous at all. I'm more impressed that I've gotten so much time to interview the chief of design and the CEO. I felt so fortunate that they were able to drop so much information. And personally, I know that driving around the Aptera prototypes on a test track and stuff is probably more exciting from a YouTube not clickbait, but like YouTube algorithm perspective. But I thought Chris Anthony dropped far more interesting information in my interview. Sorry, I know I'm biased. I keep bringing it up. But he dropped numbers. He dropped specs that I had never seen Aptera talk about before. So I found that interview more insightful and more exciting because than the Jerry Rig Everything video, even though it was cool to just see, Zach promote them and everything. But honestly, after watching his video, it was cool, but it didn't really tell us anything that, if you were a hardcore Aptera fan, it didn't really tell you anything you didn't already know. He basically just said, Aptera supports right to repair. It's very efficient, aerodynamic, and it has solar that charges it. And you're like, okay, if you're a hardcore fan like I am, there was no new information from that video. But there was a lot of new information in my interview that I was like, whoa, okay, they're targeting 300 kilowatts, or, they might go to an 18 kilowatt hour pack. And I got to make more videos about that interview after the fact that were really fun and did pretty well. And I was really excited about making them. So, no, there's no jealousy whatsoever. But, if they offered me to ride around in a prototype, for sure I would. But they did. So we just need to schedule the time to do that. And I think I would rather check out Gamma because that's basically their latest generation prototype. That's the closest to the production model. Based on what I've heard from other channels, I'm not too interested in riding around in the alpha vehicle or the beta vehicle. It doesn't have super comfortable seating, and the road noise is really loud, and it's hand built and very shaky. So I don't think I would be as excited to ride around in the alpha and the beta, but I'm very excited to check out the Gamma, which they said they were open to. So I don't know when, but that would be cool. Snake arm charger obstructs walking path, could be really annoying in a garage. Only when it's plugged in? I don't think it's that common of a, like, right now EVs are already becoming some of the most popular vehicles sold, which again points to my concept of, if you think wireless charging is necessary for EVs, then you believe there's a demand problem, essentially. Like, there's not enough people ordering them, and we need to increase the desirability. I fundamentally disagree with that. I think we need to improve the obtainability. We need to make them more affordable and more available. We need to make more of them so that, which we're seeing right now. Teslas have increased in availability. There's lots in inventory. So prices drop. Prices go down. More people can buy EVs, more people can afford them. It's not a desirability problem. It's an availability problem, which is why, again, we've got tons of EVs already. People are charging from home, and I don't think that the walking path is that big a deal. If it's that big a problem and you're walking around your garage that much, I don't think you're going to be that inconvenienced by the 5 seconds it takes to grab your cable and plug it in. If you have a mobile connector, you can kind of leave the cable on the ground and just step over it. The Snake Charger is for people who can't be bothered. I don't want to even have to grab a cable and plug it in when I get in the car. Or when I get out of the car. That takes so much time. Is that the kind of person walking around their garage constantly? I don't think they're walking around it too much. I don't think that's a huge problem personally. What is the difference between a normal Tesla and a demo model? I've noticed the website inventory Tesla sells demo models cheaper. It's basically the Tesla vehicles that are in the showrooms, which means that they've probably gone on a few test drives and they might have a little bit more wear on the interior because there's been people sitting in them for maybe years or months, depending on how old the vehicle is. Let's see. Rundra says, what is your opinion on a lot of vehicles just slapping an iPad on the dashboard with absolutely horrendous software? Do you prefer solid buttons for certain tasks? No, I mean, if you're implying that it's Tesla, because that's usually what people mean by slapping an iPad, I love that approach because I hate buttons and dials. On my last car, there were so many buttons that broke. On my dad's pickup truck too, there's dials and stuff that don't work anymore. Like you try to turn up on the volume and it goes down. I drove a 52-year-old Mercedes last month for my Florida trip, and there were so many buttons and dials that are all mushy and they don't work anymore. I love software and I love minimalism and I like simplicity of interior, so I very much prefer the minimalistic approach of Teslas. I understand it's not for everybody, which is why I'm grateful that there's competition that can offer more buttons and dials. It feels like pretty much everybody other than Tesla is in favor of keeping certain buttons and dials, but to each their own. And personally, I love the simplicity. I love the look, the aesthetic, because I'm typically not adjusting my volume constantly or adjusting my air temperature constantly. I need to once in a while adjust it. So that's why I don't think it deserves a whole physical button or a whole physical latch. I'm the weirdo that likes not having a glove box latch. I like that it just looks cleaner. It looks so simple. It looks so streamlined. That's one of the favorite things about Teslas to me, is just how simple and how elegant they look. It's a personal preference thing. I don't expect everyone to agree with me on it, but no, I love it when they slap a big iPad on the dash, but I think Teslas have the best software for cars, so I don't know which cars you're referring to that have their horrendous software, but in general, whether or not it's an iPad screen or whether or not they have buttons and dials, I've seen cars that have buttons and dials that still have horrendous software. So to me, those are not one or the other. It's like you can have lots of physical buttons and dials and still have terrible software, and to me that ruins the car. I think too many buttons is a problem in a lot of vehicles. I mean, they get complicated and they have little icons, and I know a lot of people that buy newer cars and they don't know what half the buttons even do because they just use their car to cover the basics. They're not interested in learning every little nook and cranny. I've had friends that buy these newer end cars and they don't understand what half. They're like, oh, I don't even know what that button does. It's like you're pumping this interior full of all these buttons and dials, and like half your customers are never even using them. So I'm very much in favor of just go all in on software. I think if you have really, really good software, you don't need buttons and dials. Let's see. Still the best despite some problems, but it feels modern, not exactly futuristic. Why can't more cars have more modern software? I know. I just feel like use your phone, use your iPad, use your laptop, and then try to emulate that user interface, that responsiveness on your car. And it feels like the legacy automakers and even some of the startups don't do that. Like they're not even close to hitting the software simplicity that our phones have. Quick fact check: NACS is better than CCS. That's correct, Alpha. Thank you. Let's see. What else? Biggest issue I have is forgetting to plug in occasionally. Tesla needs a simple notification to tell you you're not plugged in. Do that. Not overdevelop wireless. Yeah, I mean, to me, it's just kind of a force of habit. I don't even really think about it. I just get out of the car and I just think, when you get back when you get home, you typically see your state of charge, and if it's low, you go, okay, I need to plug in. It's, to me, I don't know that many people that forget to plug in. What happened the other week, actually, what didn't happen was I didn't forget to plug in, but I forgot to set my charge limit up higher, because a lot of the time my car is not driving very far, so that's why I don't always charge it to 100%. I make sure to charge it to 100% once a week because it's a lithium iron phosphate battery pack, so it likes to be charged to 100% a week. That's actually good for it. But one night, I forgot to set it to full. I left it at 69% or whatever, and the next morning, I realized that we were actually going to be driving a bit more than I expected. We had some plans change. We had some friends invite us to a lunch, and they were kind of far away from us. So I was like, oh, wait, we're going to be driving more than I expected today. So we didn't have range anxiety, but we had like charging cost anxiety, because our options was, okay, we can either charge the car now, but it's no longer off peak. It was like in the afternoons. It was like, okay, if we charge the car now, it's going to cost more. So it was home and I could plug it in and everything, but it was like, do I want to pay extra for those kilowatt hours, or do we want to stop by the public charger, in town that we're going to be nearby, and just top off there after the lunch and then come home? And it was a little bit of a logistics problem, but it was more that I forgot to set the charge limit properly. It wasn't that I forgot to plug it in. I feel like in the same way you can say, like, well, what if people forget to go to the gas station? It's like, I mean, the car's usually going to do a pretty good job reminding you. I guess there could be a setting that gives you a push notification. It's like, hey, did you want to plug in your car tonight? But sometimes my car is at such a high state of charge and I don't plan on driving it the next day, so I'll just leave it unplugged. Not forgetting to charge equals you don't have kids. Yeah, I guess that's true. That may be part of it for sure. But Randy has kids. I'll ask him if he on the next podcast. Maybe we should ask Randy if he's accustomed to forgetting to plug it in. Let's see. I'd set up a nice dual, maybe triple wall connector on a 60 amp circuit. Thank goodness wall connectors can load share. Triple wall connector for how many vehicles? Ivan says, I think they're waiting for the new V4 chargers to launch here in the US, though I think they could have installed longer cables along with the Magic Dock on V3. Obviously, it's possible, but I understand why they didn't personally, because the cables are one of the most expensive parts. For one, it's a mobile cable, which means it has to be beefed up a bit more than just, internal cables. There's wires and electronics and stuff inside the cabinets and the stalls, but they're not grabbed by the user. They're not flexible. They're not moved around, so that they don't need as much insulation and they don't need as complicated material as the supercharger connector is. And that copper and that wiring that goes into a supercharger cable is very pricey. And I don't think it's simple to just pop out and put in a new one. You basically have to take out the entire stall, rewire the whole thing. It's not just like, oh yeah, put an extension in there, because especially on V3 superchargers, they are liquid cooled. There is liquid in those cables. So it's not just some easy thing to pop out and put in a new one. So I think that's why they probably didn't extend V3 supercharging cables. Like, it would have been far more expensive. And my love of the Magic Dock was that it was just such an intuitive, simple install. Like, within the span of a couple weeks, basically, we saw photos and evidence of Tesla staff showing up at a few superchargers. They just have these little docks that can fit in a box that you can send through the standard mail service. They just go up to a charger, they pull out the old dock that doesn't do anything, install the new one, plug the NACS connector into the CCS adapter, and boom. Like, it was probably like less than an hour to install those Magic Docks at these existing locations. So it's like, if you wanted to quickly deploy a universal charging standard, like so that Teslas can charge there and non-Teslas can charge there, that was a super cost-effective and fast way to do it. Requiring the extension cord is not going to be cheap, and it's not going to be quick. But then again, I applauded the Magic Dock for being simple and streamlined, and now it's been like almost a month. How long have they been open? It feels like a while, and there's still only 10 locations, which is kind of like, oh, okay. I don't know. V4 superchargers would definitely be the better solution, though, that's for sure. They've got the longer cables, and they're better positioned so that any EV doesn't have to occupy another EV's parking space, that kind of thing. Um, let's see. Thank you, CJ, for appreciating the skits. I know not everybody likes the skits, but um, I, I like doing them myself, and they make me laugh, and hopefully they make you laugh. I'm sorry if they don't make you laugh. That's why I include the chapters. They're very easy to skip. I know they're cringy. I kind of like cringy. Cringy makes me laugh. Um, let's see. You do not want to see the 2010 to 2016 Buicks. Buttons everywhere. Oh no, I'm afraid I have seen them. Thoughts on Tesla first-party accessories such as their mats, pet liners, and car covers? Are they overpriced or high quality and worth it over cheaper alternatives? I haven't bought any Tesla first-party accessories. I'm very happy with the third-party ones I got. I got aftermarket pedals. I got aftermarket floor mats, and I got third-party console wrap and screen protector. And honestly, I think it's just really saturated. There's like a crap ton of Tesla accessories out there, and a lot of them are appearingly just as good or better than the first-party solutions. So yeah, I think Tesla, very similar to Apple, just kind of charges a premium on their accessories for the sake of high margin, and we know that if you're buying it from us, you're probably going to pay more for it anyway. So, yeah, it's probably a pretty high margin business. I personally don't think they're worth the money. But again, I haven't bought them, so I can't say if they're like noticeably better. But I remember when I was looking at floor mats that there were several third-party options that had better coverage or better build quality, or they covered up the interior fabric on the car better than the first party solution, and they cost less than the first party solution. So I personally think that Tesla first party accessories are not worth it, but that's just me. I could be biased. If you could change only one thing about the Model 3, what would it be? I have a long-range Model 3 and I love it. Congrats on getting your LFP Model 3. Thank you, Shooter. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's a good question. If I could change one thing, ooh, it's hard because there's honestly a bunch of things I would change. You probably want one answer, but I might give you a couple. I would love it if the frunk was powered. I think that would be a really cool quality of life perk if the frunk could just open and close all by itself. I don't know if that's the top one, though. You know, where I live, it gets very, very hot. So I would honestly love it if they eventually brought down the ventilated seat option to the lower end cars. There's cheaper cars than the Model 3 out there that have cooled seats, so it's not that crazy of a request, in my opinion. It's not really that much of a luxury feature. I've never been able to experience the ventilated seats in a Model S and X. I will try to the next time I check one out. Maybe it'll be hotter next time I drive one. But yeah, where I live, it gets like well over 110 degrees and stuff. It gets super hot. So I don't really care about having more range personally. I've got more range than I need. Even with the lowest range Tesla they make, I've still struggled to run out of range, unless it's a skill issue, basically, where I forget to set the charge limit higher. It was like the car was plugged in, it could have charged to full, and instead I charged it to 69%, and then we ended up driving a ton that day, way more than usual. It was like twice as much driving that we typically do. So like right now, we drove around my father-in-law and we showed him a bunch of, cool locations, and we went to dinner and we went to family at my grandma's house, and we did all this driving, and I didn't charge it to full last night. I charged it to 80%, and now we're at 64%. So more range is not anywhere close on my list. I'm honestly like, if I didn't have the current Tesla I have, and I was in today's market of EVs, if I could do it all over again, I probably would consider buying a used standard range Model 3, because you can get those for low 30s. Someone on Twitter this morning, I think, was asking me what I thought of one of these used vehicles in Tesla's inventory, and it was $32,000 for a mid-range Model 3, which when new it had like a 260 mile range, but it had 30,000 miles on it, so it's probably more like 230 mile range now. But still, knowing how I drive and knowing how the max range number matters so little when you're road tripping, because you don't charge to full, you just fast charge until you can reach to your next location. I really feel like the max range number is overrated. People put too much faith in that number. So range is not on my list, but What else? Oh, the accessibility handles has come up a lot. Like I have many older family members that kind of struggle getting in and out of cars. And the fact that this is the only car I've ever seen that doesn't have those little handles that you can grab when you're getting out or getting in. It's bizarre to me that they don't have those. I feel like there's a simple and intuitive way to add them, but yeah, I mean, I would. There's other things I'd like, but they're not like my top requested feature. You know, I'd like to have the Steam library access if you want to play games on the car. That'd be fun. Or a higher refresh rate display would be kind of nice, or a bigger display. Or I'd like a yoke. I'd be willing to try a yoke. I don't want a driver display, but I would like a yoke. Or the new Model S's have that more transparent glass roof where you can see through it, but it still has the same ultraviolet protection. I would love to check that out. I'm very curious to see how much light that lets in, and that probably changes the whole feel of the interior, having that much natural light in the daytime. I'd be curious how hot it gets, but I would love to see that on the Model 3. On that subject, GreenPad says, does the Model 3 glass ceiling offer enough protection from the sun during longer trips? Absolutely. Personally, if you're asking me, I think it's kind of too dark. There's a lot of situations where I'm trying to see something through the glass roof, and it's so tinted that you can't really get a lot of detail. Or I always thought it would be cool if at nighttime you could look through the glass roof and see the stars. But because it's so tinted, you don't get a lot of visual. You don't get a lot of information through it. So in my experience, it does not get... I mean, if you touch it, it's hot. But most of the time, you're not touching the roof of your car. But I don't feel the heat, even in the summer. As long as you got the AC running, which in the summertime you typically do anyway. So yeah, I would say it does offer enough protection. Let's see. My Cobalt is just as minimalistic as a 3, I guess. Driving Econo boxes your whole life, you don't really understand buttons everywhere. I don't know what car you're referring to. I need to check that one out. I used to like Lamborghinis. When I was a kid, I just thought they looked cool. I mean, they still look cool, but over time, once I started checking out, even from a young age, I thought that the concept of not using gas was cool. Because I remember when I was a kid, I think I went to a book fair and they had these like Lamborghini posters, and I was like, that's a really cool car. And I was reading up on them, and I was like, whoa, they're so expensive. Maybe one day I'll have enough money to afford a Lamborghini. But then I remember reading about how they have like terrible mileage, and they were like 8 miles a gallon or something crazy like that. Super inefficient vehicle. And once I saw that, I was like, oh, so even when I buy my dream car, I'm still going to have to pay like hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month on gas because it's super inefficient. And I remember that being a turnoff. Even when I was really, really little, I was just like, that sucks that it's such an inefficient motor and everything. But I just thought it looked cool. I didn't really care about the performance. I just thought it was a pretty design language. But then it was actually a teacher at my elementary school that got one of the early hybrids. Like this is when the Prius was just kind of coming out. It wasn't a Prius. It was like a hybrid Honda Civic or something. But I always would try to meet up with that teacher and ask him about it. I was like, whoa, like how quiet is it? And he would sometimes like, drive off at the end of the day and I would want to listen. I'd be like, whoa, you can barely hear it. All there is the tire sound. So even before I knew what Tesla was, I was interested in the concept of, whoa, like what's the miles per gallon on that? And he was like, oh man, probably like, 50 or 60 miles per gallon. I was like, oh my God, that's so efficient. And the gas engine doesn't even kick on for a lot of the driving, it's just, when you first get in there, it doesn't have that ignition. It just rolls away. I always thought that was so cool. And I remember as a kid counting, like I'd go out, not go out, but when we were riding in the car, I was in the back seat. I would be like, oh, there's a Prius. Oh, wait, there's a Prius. Just like a lot of people do with Teslas now. But Teslas have become commonplace now. It's more like, oh, there's a Rivian. Oh, I saw a Lucid. Oh, yeah, it's like, it's rare. Teslas have become so common, you don't really count them. My father-in-law still does. We're driving him around in the Tesla, and he's like, oh, look, a Tesla. Like it's, I guess in Australia, they're not as common. So to him, it's like a big deal when you see one on the road. But when I was real little, I was always interested in the more efficient and the vehicles that didn't use gas. And then once I found out about Tesla, that quickly became my dream car because I was like, wait a minute, it looks cool. It's got that big screen. and there's no gas at all. And I remember reading about it in like a automotive magazine that my dad got once, and he showed a Model S to me or the Roadster or something, and I was like, "What? That was awesome!" But as a kid, you can't. Everything's a dream car because you don't have money. You can't even drive. But as I got older, I kept following Tesla more than anything because I just hated the combustion engine and on my car, and I hated the process of going to gas stations. I just kind of accepted it because I didn't really know there was any kind of alternative. But every year I kind of got a little bit more interested, and I followed Tesla a little bit more closely over time. So, yeah, I liked Lamborghinis when I was like 8 or 10 years old, but the fact that they've never made a full electric one is kind of disappointing to me. I know they just unveiled like a hybrid one, but that's like a half butt approach. Since you have a Tesla, can you actually play Cyberpunk in the car? Not all Teslas can play Cyberpunk. Mine does not offer that, but there are very, very expensive Teslas that can do that. Yes. What is the name says, what is the lifespan of a typical EV? Well, that's kind of a weird way of describing it. I guess my definition of a typical EV would be like, what's the most common EV sold? Which in that case is like a Model Y or a Model 3. That's like the highest selling electric car in the world. And in many countries, it's becoming the most popular car, period. And it's hard to say because both the Model 3 and Y are not that old, but there are still people driving around 2017, 2018 Model 3s, and they have pretty minimal range degradation. There's some battery health deterioration, of course, but it's not more than usually 10 or 15%. I've watched a lot of long-term Tesla reviewers. Like I watched a video of a guy with a Model 3 from 2018 I think he had like 200,000 miles on it. And he said he had like 12% degradation after 200,000 miles. So he put a lot of miles on his car very quickly. And there's a little bit of a difference between cycle life and calendar life. Like sometimes batteries degrade one way when they're just drained and charged up over and over again versus a different way when they're just in storage for 5 years, 10 years. So we don't have a ton of data, but so far it feels like the typical EV, like a Model Y or Model 3, should easily last, in my opinion, 15 plus years. We don't have a lot of data on how today's chemistries, like the 2170 cells and the new battery packs, they seem to be performing a lot better than the earlier, like, I would say non-typical EV. If you're talking about like a Chevy Bolt or a Nissan Leaf from 2012 or 2010, or the Model S's from 2012 had a lot of problems because that was basically Tesla's like first vehicle, and there was a lot of powertrain issues, and the battery pack wasn't very good at maintaining itself and keeping the health high. So there's a lot of things they've learned since then, and it appears that the degradation on like Tesla websites that track that stuff, it appears that the degradation on the Model 3 and Y is a lot less noticeable than that of the Model S and X of the early days. The newer S's and X's have more battery management systems that make sure the cells are kept at optimum temperatures and they keep good care, and they design the powertrain to be a lot more reliable and have less maintenance. So I would say 15 years is my ballpark guess as to when. I'm not even that convinced that the battery pack will be the issue, because really all that most battery standards are designed for, most EVs are planning for, is that the battery has to keep over 80% health for 10 or 15 years, roughly, that kind of ballpark. But it's not like the EV just like explodes and stops working if the battery health dips below 80%. So like, my car, right now, when I charge it to full, it says it has 266 miles of range. Let's say I have another like 30% degradation, which, because I have a iron-based battery pack, will be a lot harder to achieve that. But let's say I do. Okay, now my maximum range is 186 miles. I don't drive that in a day. Most superchargers are going to be much further apart than 180 miles. So I guess that would be my question for like, how long does it last? Are you saying like, when you're saying what's the lifespan, are you saying like the car stops working, like it just won't turn on? I mean, with electric vehicles, I think it's more likely there will be other things that stop working or stop being practical after 10 or 15 years because they're a lot more connected. Like a problem I think a lot of current Teslas are going to have long term, like after decades of use, is all of our Teslas right now only have 4G. They don't have 5G modems. And I don't personally think 5G is that helpful or that big a deal, but the carriers that operate the 5G and 4G networks have been known to discontinue support after so many years. Like the early Model S's from 2012, they only had 3G. They did not have 4G connectivity. So more recently, in the past 3 or 4 years, carriers started discontinuing 3G, which means that those older Model S's no longer had the proper hardware to stay connected to the internet, and a lot of features stopped working. Now, Tesla went back and offered retrofits and said, okay, for $2,000, we'll put in a new MCU, and that will update the processor. It'll make the screen a lot more responsive and faster, and it adds 4G and that kind of thing. So there could be retrofits in the future to make your car more future-proof, but I think it's more like technological standards that will start to become impractical, like the GPS might stop working properly if there's new standards, or the display might start fading because it's been used so much, and after 10 or 15 years, maybe got to replace the display. But if the display is bad or the wiring is loose, like, do you consider that the whole car is dead, or does it just need a new screen? Is that just standard maintenance and stuff? So I guess I would ask for a more clear definition on lifespan, because personally, I don't think the battery packs are going to just straight up die and stop working after even 20 or 30 years. I think, okay, even if you have let's say Model Y Mike, he bought basically, for all intensive purposes, Model Y Mike basically bought the first Model Y, okay? He was very close to the Fremont factory. He put in his order right away. He took delivery basically the exact month that they started Model Y deliveries. Let's say Mike is driving his Model Y 30 years from now. And there's like, I don't think it will be this much. Who's to say? Like maybe let's round higher. 40 years from now, he, for some reason or whatever reason, is still driving that same Model Y. Let's say it has like 50% battery health. Okay, so the battery has lost half of its original capacity. Okay, in that case, he still has a 40 kilowatt hour battery pack in that car. It's a fairly efficient vehicle, so his range is going to be like 150 miles instead of 300 or whatever. But you can still drive that around town, and you can... Sorry, my wife's listening. You could turn that battery pack into a vehicle, not vehicle, a power wall, basically, a home energy storage for grid backup, or for a solar package. Like, there's uses for that battery pack even after it's gotten thousands of cycles on it. So that's why, to me, it's kind of weird to ask, like, well, what's the lifespan? But I mean, I don't think 2170s are necessarily bulletproof, but I think it's more likely that you won't get below a battery health of 70%. It's more likely that you will get in some kind of collision that will damage the structure of the vehicle, and then it just won't it won't be worth repairing. It will cost more to repair the vehicle than it will cost to buy a new one. It'll be totaled, essentially. It's more likely, I think, for your vehicle to be totaled than for the battery pack to conk out on you at this point. With newer grade batteries. I'm not talking about like 2012, 2013 Model S's. I'm talking about like LFP Model 3s, like the one I have. Super high cycle life, super stable chemistry, state-of-the-art battery management system. They've really ironed out this to work in a way where there's very minimal degradation. Let's see. I bet degradation has a big difference with use in colder climates after many years. That's true. There's not a one side. It's not just cycle life. Burkhardt says, I remember reading a rumor that 3s and Ys with the AMD APUs would end up getting steam later down the road. Doesn't seem like they'll end up coming to fruition, however, sadly. I remember Grain the Only reporting on that, yeah, but I think that the Tesla software team is just so incredibly overworked. Like they have so much stuff to do, and there's a bunch of things that they still haven't gotten around doing. And Elon's adding things on Twitter all the time. Yeah, we're gonna have to add dog mode auto activation now, and the Tesla Semi is having software bugs, and people are having to pull it off the side of the road. And the Tesla Semi still doesn't have autopilot, not even enhanced autopilot. Like on top of that, add full self-driving beta. Oh my God, like autopilot, the free version is still 4 years old and making all kinds of mistakes for me on a daily basis. Like the Tesla software team has just this huge laundry list of things to get to that I just, I don't think that the gaming capabilities are high on their list of priorities, unfortunately. And to be honest, I'm not really a gamer, so I probably wouldn't play them even if they were there. Jacob, thank you for the super chat. He says, why do we even care about cellular connectivity in cars in general? Well, for the most part, it's not a huge deal, but like it can become one over time because you don't necessarily fully understand how much cellular connectivity is utilized. Like for one, like maps, like where you're going when you plug in the car. I want to go to this location. A lot of the time that's using LTE. Even if you have standard connectivity, it's still using cellular. It will upload or download updates through that. A lot of people pay for premium connectivity to stream music and stuff from the car, access the cameras through Sentry mode, through cellular connectivity. So a bunch of those features start to go away and stop working. And maybe a bigger concern we should express is like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, because our cars have a certain Wi-Fi and Bluetooth standard. I don't think it's a very high one. I think Teslas have like Wi-Fi 5 and Bluetooth. I'm not sure if it's Bluetooth 5. But as time goes on, if you're owning that piece of tech for 10, 20 years, yeah, I know you say your phones already do that, but what if your phone can't connect to the car? Because your new iPhone uses Bluetooth, 8, and your car is using Bluetooth 4. Well, now the car key feature doesn't work where you just want to walk up to the car and it unlocks and walk away and it locks. If the phone is on a super new standard of Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and the car isn't, then you're going to start to have more issues with connectivity. So I'm not saying the cellular connectivity is a huge problem. I'm just saying it's more likely for other things to go wrong or to stop working and prevent the car. Like if you're, I don't know, that big screen on the Tesla will probably start to feel very dumb and very outdated if you can't use navigation, right? Like all it does is show you the little visualization. But if you're like, okay, let me plug in the directions. Oh, wait, it can't do that because the carrier's discontinued 4G, so this doesn't access that anymore. Okay, let's hotspot off the phone. Oh, your phone doesn't support that older Wi-Fi standard, so you can't connect it to your phone anymore. Now you got to use the key fob. Now you got to use the key card more regularly. So over time, I think that the computer and the tech might age a lot worse. Bluetooth should be backwards compatible, I agree, but to a point. I don't know if I genuinely don't know. I don't know if like the devices that are on Bluetooth 1 are still compatible with the phones that are using Bluetooth 5.2 or whatever. I genuinely don't know, but I could see the same way it goes down with carriers and Wi-Fi connectivity. In the future, we may have routers and stuff on Wi-Fi 7 and Wi-Fi 8, and the Tesla won't be capable of connecting to that or have a harder time connecting to it, and then it gets slower. And so the overall ownership experience might get progressively worse after 10 to 15 years, but I don't think it's necessarily just because of the battery pack. I think people are over-exaggerating the importance of how's that battery going to age? What's the degradation? I'm like, there's probably other problems, especially knowing Teslas and how they go very cheap on the interior materials. I like it. I like its simplicity and it's fine. But over time, I could definitely see just how I can already hear a few creaks and rattles in my car. I'm like, after driving this for, 300,000 miles, there's probably going to be all kinds of creaks and rattles or things that start breaking off and door handles not opening properly. There will probably be other problems. Yeah, long-range Model 3, what's the holdup and why is range so inaccurate? Well, you're probably because your efficiency is not what the EPA stated it would be. You would get your EPA range if you probably drove at speed limit speeds, but most people don't want to do that. So that's why we don't get our EPA range estimates. I actually do tend to. If I can get 220 watt hours per mile, then that's my EPA estimate. And sometimes I get better than that. Sometimes I get worse than that, depending on the temperatures. I rode across the U.S. on Amtrak. It was really fun, but it was way too expensive for the service you're getting. I did learn it's really popular in Colorado. Yeah, I did that last year. It was fun. The cross-country Amtrak ride was beautiful through the Rockies, and we stopped in Chicago, then went to New York City. It was a lot of fun, but also it was a gift from my father-in-law, so I didn't have to pay for it. I don't think I would have paid for it myself. Let's see. Do you think LFP will be better in the cold than in lithium? Okay, LFP is still lithium ion, to be fair. It's just a different cathode. But from what I've heard, I haven't seen like measurable differences, but everyone just keeps saying that LFP is worse performance in the cold or doesn't charge as fast in the cold. But I don't really know how wide the gap is between LFP and I assume you mean like a long-range Tesla, like a 2170 nickel-based cathode. It's like those battery packs don't do great in the cold either. Like if you're in extreme cold, the battery packs tend to not charge as well and you tend to lose your range, whether it's a standard range with LFP or a long range with nickel cathode. Like I haven't seen someone do a good test of like, okay, here's how fast the LFP charges in the cold. Here's how fast the 2170s charge in the cold. Typically they both charge slower in the cold. That's just the running thesis is that if you're driving in an EV and it's like below freezing, the battery pack needs to condition itself. And I believe I've seen evidence that battery preconditioning takes longer in the LFP Model 3 because the 2170 cells actually naturally get hotter. Just in general usage, you don't even have to be preconditioning it. Just by driving on the freeway, the 2170 packs, they get pretty hot. So when you precondition it to warm it up to get fast charged, they don't have to try very hard to warm up the battery pack because it's already hot. LFP is such a stable, such a safe chemistry. That's why it's like way less likely to combust. It's basically impossible to get an LFP battery pack to catch on fire. Not impossible, but you know, it's a lot harder. And because the battery pack runs so cool, when you select a supercharger and it starts preconditioning, it has to try a lot harder to heat up the battery pack. But in my experience, I've never had an issue, but I guess I live in a not too cold climate. But I mean, I've done some road trips when it was, 40, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, which is not, I know it's not that cold, but I've never had an issue where I plugged into a supercharger and the charging speeds were limited because of the temperature. I'm a bad example because I don't live in a place where it gets, below zero or like a lot of the US where it gets super cold. But the way I understand it, LFP is not as good as 2170s in the cold, but I don't know how wide that margin is because I know that even Lucids and, all EVs, nickel or not, charge slower in the cold. And then you got to use more energy to heat up the battery pack, and that worsens your range and stuff. So, yeah. I guess there is a hotspot. Hopefully that would keep working. I agree with Rudra. People are worrying a bit too much on the battery degradation. There are other factors that could fail before the battery. The 12-volt battery, that causes a lot of problems. That's why, thankfully, Tesla has switched to lithium-ion 12 volts instead of lead-acid batteries. But for quite a while, they were using lead-acid batteries. Like my friend Randy's Model 3 has had issues because of the lead-acid battery dying on him. So he had to get that replaced. Whereas the lithium-ion 12-volt batteries they use now should last basically the life of the car, but I don't know what that means to Tesla. At least at Investor Day, they said that the lithium-ion 12-volt lasts as long as the car does, but to them that could mean 10 years, maybe it's 15. So it'd be kind of interesting if after 15 years I had issues with my 12-volt battery. I'd be like, okay, well, on a gas car, it usually needs to be serviced after, 3 or 4 years. We had to get a new 12-volt for my gas car right before we got our Tesla because it died on us in the middle of a road trip. It was kind of annoying. Let's see. How often does Navigate on Autopilot make a mistake or slip up for you on the highway? Well, I don't have Navigate on Autopilot, so I'm not using it all that much. But when I had it, I used it for 1,200 miles, and it was pretty frequent. I would say it couldn't go an hour without doing something wrong. Either it would brake too hard, or it would cut people off or change lanes at the wrong time. I was not impressed. Let's just say I don't have Navigate on Autopilot for a reason. It is not very impressive to me. It's smart, but it's not wise. It's not very strategic. I think by far the most annoying thing I watch everybody's videos on FSD Beta, and we have people in our Discord that test FSD Beta that I watch, and they tell me how the the latest single stack version performs and everything. And it's still making the same exact mistakes that my autopilot is making, which is like not getting out of a lane quick enough when there's signs that say the lane is ending, or like there's oncoming traffic on the on-ramp and you need to make room for them, otherwise they're going to hit you or honk at you or whatever, and the Tesla just doesn't care. The Tesla's just like, nope, I'm in my lane. I'm going to go as fast as I want. It's like, you either got to speed up or slow down, otherwise I got to adjust the speed, and basically I'm still driving. The car's not doing everything. Is extreme heat or extreme cold worse for EVs? That's a good question. They're both kind of equally bad in my experience. I mean, I've watched videos on people testing both. I think I would argue cold is probably worse because EVs, with their main priority of efficiency, tend to be making the switch to more heat pumps, at least all Teslas, which are the most common EV. They have heat pumps in them. And from the way I understand it, the heat pumps in Teslas don't work that well once you get below a certain temperature. They work, but very slowly. Whereas I feel like even if you're driving a Tesla when it's like 110 or 120 degrees out, it's going to eat into your efficiency for one, because it has to cool down the battery pack, and you're running the AC in the car, so that's using more energy and eating into your efficiency and everything. But I feel like the heat pump is better optimized for, like, well, no, that's not true. Heat pumps are kind of good for handling mildly cold weather. They don't cool down the cabin as quickly, but they're definitely more efficient. So I think I would say extreme cold is worse than extreme heat, but both can be an issue. Both can eat into your range quite a bit. Let's see. When I said lifespan, I was thinking similar to gas cars, which may be around 200,000 miles for the lifespan until it's too expensive to fix. Guess it's too hard to judge with EVs. I've already seen several channels get their Tesla Model 3s, and I think I've seen at least one Model Y that's gotten close to 200,000 miles. And, there's little issues here and there, but I wouldn't say like the car is dead at 200K. Considering how little maintenance there is, there's no oil changes, there's less moving parts, there's no transmission or anything. I don't see why EVs would last any less longer than a gas car would. My first gas car died long before it hit 200,000 miles. I think it was at like 120 or something. My first vehicle was a Ford Ranger from 2000, and it had transmission failure, shortly after a head gasket failure, and it got so expensive to fix that it wasn't worth it anymore. So we just had to send it to the scrapyard because it couldn't go backwards, basically. It couldn't go in reverse, which I actually drove it for a couple months without having the option of going in reverse, which caused a lot of problems, but I just had to live with it. I'd put it in neutral and put my feet out and push it backward out of parking spaces and stuff. And luckily, where I was living at the time, my driveway was kind of a loop, so I could just keep it going straight. When I was ready to leave, I could just drive forward. But the cost to replace it was going to be several $1,000s or to fix it, and it wasn't worth keeping anymore. So it didn't make it to 200K. It just depends on the car, I guess. Do you do behind-the-scenes streams on EV as well? And would you have been willing to remove the glass roof for a regular metal roof to pay even less for your car? Ooh. Maybe. I really like the glass roof, but I guess, yeah, it would depend on how much. It's not like, I noticed that the Aptera is not going to have a glass roof, but I'm not really worried about that. So I guess you're right. Yeah, it's a nice to have if Tesla offered a body roof option. I think the main reason they stopped offering the body roof is it's not really that much cheaper. For one, you have to paint more. It's another surface you have to paint. And also, most body-colored roofs are very flimsy, just aluminum. They're not really safe. So, like, if something fell on the car, it'll go right through that metal roof. Whereas the glass that Tesla uses for their roofs is really, really strong, actually. Like, it has an extremely high breaking point. It could shatter, but it won't actually collapse until it reaches some kind of insane metric. I think it was like 10,000 pounds or something. You'd have to put so much weight on that glass roof to get it to break. So it's a safety feature. It also kind of feels like a luxury roof. I guess it has some sound isolation benefits. But yeah, if I could save maybe $3,000 or $4,000 with a metal roof, I would do it. But I basically understand why Tesla doesn't offer that, because it's not that. I don't think it really saves that much money versus a glass roof. Let's see. No, Haseal, I do not do behind the scenes streams on EV. Sorry. I doubt. Burkhart says, I doubt LTE networks will be killed off anytime soon. There were only a handful of years of devices created with 3G, with relevant and smartphones, etc., which much smaller scale. Billions of devices have been made with LTE, and there's still no LTE devices being made today. LTE shutdown is probably over 20 years out at least. I hope you're right, for the record. I would love that. I really, really hope you're accurate on that. But it's just kind of assuming for the carriers won't be scummy. And carriers, I just don't trust them to do the right thing. I think you should expect carriers and internet service providers to always do the evil thing, and trying to push everyone to buy more 5G things so that they can streamline their networks and make them easier to run or cheaper to run or something. Like, it's not a bad expectation to have, that we might have LTE discontinuation sooner than we'd like. I don't know if that means 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, but I hope you're right. I hope LTE is here to stick around. Let's see. Bluetooth should be backwards compatible. I agree. Haven't studies shown that wireless chargers can transfer 90% plus of the charging energy wirelessly? I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea at all. Just my 2 cents, man. Sorry, we kind of talked about it at the beginning, but personally, I've seen in labs they've been able to prove that. But what I know about inductive charging with smartphones and the laws of physics that you bump up against, and the distance the energy has to travel, plus the much more heavily utilized undercarriage of a car that gets muddy, that gets wet, that gets snow, that gets dirt, that there's so much stuff that builds up at the bottom of a car. I'm not convinced that after actually using the car as a real car for extended periods that you would get your 90% efficiency. Plus, it adds cost to the car, it adds complexity to the vehicle that doesn't necessarily need to be there. I think the better solution is just a snake charger that a cable plugs in to the charge port. That's backwards compatible. You could have that work on cars that are 12 years old, and it would still work with cars coming out today, whereas there's currently no EV right now that has wireless charging capability, and I think there's a darn good reason for it. Like, no startup has done it. No legacy automaker has done it. Tesla hasn't done it. Tesla's removing ultrasonic sensors that only cost $100 per car, because they're trying to get every piece of margin out of these things as possible. It's very difficult to make EVs at scale. And personally, I just think that the wireless charging adds extra cost, extra complexity, and it's assuming that there's a demand problem with EVs, and I don't believe there is one. So yeah, that kind of summarizes my thoughts on it, I guess. If Aptera's solar cells work out, great, they might. What do you mean? Do you think there will... What do you mean they might? What? We could have a lot more use out of packs because we can swap a few dead cells for a small amount. Yeah, I think it would probably be too time-consuming to individually test and figure out which cells are dead and put in new ones. But I do think that there will be a much better trade-in value for older EVs with degraded battery packs, because companies will be able to repurpose those battery packs. So even if the battery is heavily deteriorated, people will be able to find a use for it and then sell it again as a Powerwall, basically, or in a mega pack or something. So I don't see EVs depreciating the same way gas cars do, I guess, even with hundreds of thousands of miles on them. Do you think we will have third-party places that can work on batteries like Gerber Motors as the decade continues? I hope so. I think right now, during the ramp-up stage, I don't think companies are like, I hate right to repair, let's stop right to repair. It's usually just, if your focus is just on growth and achieving good margins and building vehicles quickly, you tend to just kind of sidestep repairability. That doesn't become a huge priority, because repairability usually complicates the scalability and the margins of the product. which is why it's cool that Aptera wants to prioritize that, but I think it might prove to be more complicated once you get there, because you can only build as many of your vehicle as you have parts for, but if you have to make all those parts available for repairers, then that kind of impacts how many you can build. So essentially, I think it's very easy to say you will support right to repair. It's another thing to actually support it, and I frankly don't see that many companies that do a great job supporting it, and the ones that do usually sacrifice on the quality of the product heavily, which means less people buy it. So it's kind of messy, but I think once there's more readily availability of them, then and we're no longer worried about like scaling, and we just kind of peak at EV production and all vehicles being made are EVs, that's when you could probably get more into the repairability sake and have third-party places work on battery packs and that kind of thing. Hasael says, as cell phone technology continues to plateau and EVs evolve and improve, can you ever see this channel overtaking Talos of Tech in subscribers? I think that it's kind of the wrong question. Subscribers are kind of pointless, in my opinion. They don't really mean anything. For one, YouTube subscriber notification system is broken. Like, even people that subscribe and click the bell don't get notified when they're supposed to. Analytically, I don't know what it is for the EV channel, but for the tech channel, like 57% of the views come from people that are not subscribed. And I basically never get as many views as subscribers. So that means that like 95% of the people subscribed to the channel aren't watching it, which is part of the reason I was trying to convince people to stop subscribing. I was like, I don't care how many subscribers I have. That doesn't really correlate to anything. Most people are watching YouTube through the homepage and just through their recommendations. They're not checking the subscription feed anymore. But I'm curious. I haven't looked at the EV analytics. By the way, that's why I don't ask people to subscribe. I just don't think it makes a difference. I think people over-exaggerate. Yeah, it's even more so with this. So with Tailosive EV, 61% of people watching are not subscribed to the channel. Doesn't bother me, personally. Oh, maybe I should go Lifetime. Oh, even Lifetime, it's even more so. Lifetime, 68% are not subscribed. So as more and more people are not subscribing to channels and they're just watching what shows up in the recommended, I don't really think subscribers mean anything. They don't translate to how well the channel performs. There's already been several months, actually, pretty recently, I think this month, where this EV channel, because it's getting automotive ads, and auto companies tend to spend more on ad revenue than tech companies with smartphones and stuff. Even though this channel doesn't get as many views as Tailosive Tech, it's actually bringing in more revenue than the tech channel is. So that's why, like, even though Aptera videos tend to get a couple thousand views, they make as much as like a tech video that gets like 10 or 20,000 views. So that's one of the reasons I'm very grateful to have the automotive content over here. So basically, will this channel surpass tech in subscribers? Probably not. It could. I think that the EV space is a lot more interesting and a lot more exciting than the consumer tech space of like phones and stuff. This is just getting progressively more boring. But like ultimately, I don't think it matters, because like viewership wise or ad revenue wise, this channel is already outperformed tech in many ways. So I don't know which way you want to measure it, but to me, subscriber count is a very pointless metric. It doesn't really affect anything. It doesn't increase the channel's revenue. It doesn't unlock something at a certain size, really. Once you get past 1,000 subscribers or so, you basically have access to pretty much all the same features as a channel 10 times your size. And I've looked up other channels, EV channels that I watch that have like way more subscribers than me, but they get way less views than me. And vice versa. There's channels that get way more views than me that don't have as many subscribers. So it's kind of a pointless. I don't know why people obsess over sub count so much. It doesn't really translate to anything. Let's see. A phone with a big case leads to a reduction of wireless charging speed by a lot. A car, I don't know, man. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot more space you have to cover, and you have to get the coils aligned properly. We have magnets, with our phones and MagSafe. You can attach a magnet to get it perfectly aligned. Practically, the coils are perfectly touching. And with cars like SUVs and pickup trucks, they're definitely not touching. They don't have the magnetic alignment. So in a lab, sure, I can understand, okay, we tested it and got 90% efficiency. But yeah, outside that, in the real world, I doubt they could get that personally. Um, Off topic for EV, I feel like they're already artificially limiting 4G with unscientific testing. But no, they definitely are. I've experienced that myself. And in the exact same places, I have gotten slower 4G speeds now than I used to because they're throttling it so they can upsell people on 5G. I am like 99% confident that is happening. Improving efficiencies both in battery chemistry and powertrain may make Tesla cars last 10 plus years easily, so it should make more sense overall. Oh yeah, I feel like 10 plus years has been available for a while now. There's still people driving around. I still see Model S's from like 2014, 2013 on occasion. Once in a while, a 2012 Model S, you can tell because of the color options. But yeah, there's been Teslas that have made it over 10 years already. And the ones coming out now, I think, could easily last 15. But again, what does that mean, last? Does that mean battery health over 80%? Like, if it still powers on and you can still drive it and it still gets you from point A to point B, I don't see why they can't last 40, 50 years. Why not? There's probably going to be other things that go wrong cosmetically or interior features that stop working that need to be serviced and replaced. But is the powertrain and battery pack still functional? Does it still work? Yeah. I think they'll still make it that far. Let's see. I hate Hummer EVs. I know, I don't like it too. About the company framework and their GigaChat approach to right to repair. No, I don't. Yeah, the Hummer EV is basically the antithesis of the Aptera. It's like so many things that EV haters complain about like how much material it costs to, emissions it causes to get the battery pack stuff out of the ground and how heavy they are and how that wears out the tires more. It's like most of the EV hater thesis is supported by the Hummer EV. Like the Hummer EV reinforces a lot of people's doubts about electric vehicles being better for the environment, which is, I guess, it gives more fuel to the FUD. It gives more reason for people to doubt EVs. And also, I just don't think I don't think it's what we need in the EV world. I don't think we need to convince more people that drive Hummers or people that roll coal that they need to switch to electric. And I also think that people that like Hummers and that roll coal aren't going to buy the Hummer EV. And even if they do, they're probably not going to stop also driving their diesel trucks and their crazy off-roading machines. It's just going to be another toy to them. And it's incredibly low volume. So when there's so many people that are wanting to go electric, but there's not enough availability, it's kind of frustrating and annoying to be like, okay, we're going to put 215 kilowatt hours in every one of these cars. It's like, oh, stop, please. 9,000 pounds. Are you kidding me? Yeah, it's ridiculous. We would have a lot more use out of packs because we can swap a few dead cells. Oh, okay. I think I understood what he was saying earlier. I don't care about improved power improvements. I want efficiency. I know. I think efficiency tends to mean cheaper, which is why I don't think Lucid is paying off all too well, because Lucid's trying to be efficiency focused, but then target a very, very expensive market, which I'm like, the people who care about luxury and performance and, high quality and high price vehicles, those people tend to not care so much about efficiency because they've got so much money. They don't care how much energy it consumes. I guess Lucid's mindset is just, well, this enables tons of range. But as we've talked about and as we've discovered, range is just one part of the road tripping equation. The other part is charging speed, charger availability, charger reliability. That's honestly like 75% of the equation, in my opinion, whereas the max range of the vehicle is like 25% of it. I mean, once you get past a certain point, obviously a 50-mile range EV is going to be a lot less capable than a 200-mile range EV. But like once you're past the 200-mile mark, I think at that range, it starts to matter more with what charging network do you have access to. Like, I would be very comfortable with a 180 mile range Tesla that can supercharge anywhere. Well, I would be comfortable with that over a 250-mile range EV, but it's relying on the CCS network based on how unreliable Electrify America is and how the charging stations say they're online when they're not, and sometimes they charge at slower speeds. So, like, I would rather take the lower range vehicle with the faster charging and the better network over the higher range vehicle, because I know that I can make it, 180 miles between charges as long as I have a place to plug in and I know it'll work and I know it'll be there. Um, Lucid really released their first product for like 100 grand. It was like 180 grand, I think, for the Dream Edition. Efficiency is underrated on nearly every category, from phones to laptops to cars as well. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad to see there's a growing community, though, in support of it. Like, Aptera's gotten... How are they doing? Let's check on them. Let's check on that accelerator program while you brought it up. They've had a lot of crowdfunding, honestly. I'm very impressed with how much people have tuned in to this program. Invest $10,000 to get your vehicle sooner. Let's bring it up here. Wow, they're almost at 12 million. That's great. 828 slots filled. Man, this guy's cool. RP from wherever. I don't know where MD is, but they're in the U.S. and they've invested over $1 million in Aptera, which is pretty cool. But yeah, they've just had so much crowdfunding, so much support from their community, because clearly there's a ton of people very, very interested and invested in more efficient vehicles that can charge themselves. I feel like we don't truly understand the market for that quite yet. Triggered by the title, good clickbait. Well, that's a clickbait. We talked about it. You just weren't there. It's not clickbait because you didn't watch the part where we discussed it. Are you expecting like an hour and a half long live stream to just be on one subject and nothing else? No, we do these streams with the title and thumbnail that kicks off the subject, but the reason I do live is so that the chat can bring up whatever they want, and I will address the chat, and the topics shift and change. Maybe you're new here and you didn't know that, but it's not clickbait. Material science will solve the inefficiencies. Well, why don't you scroll back to the beginning of the live stream, and so I don't have to repeat myself for the people that have been watching since the beginning. It's not just the energy efficiency problem, and the material science will solve the inefficiencies thing could have been said about hydrogen fuel cells, and that also never went anywhere. You can imagine what I said, but that's not the truth. That's not what I said. I said it's more about what the car requires than it is the energy transition process. But please tell me why no one has done it yet if it's such a good idea. Why has no one done it? Why is no one pursuing it? Yeah, like my viewpoint of efficiency is just that means better. Like another word for efficiency is it's just smarter. If you can use less to get more, that's smart. That's just the better engineering style. So that's why I think Aptera being the most efficient is just like the best. And I think really the only compromise with the Aptera is seating. Other than that, I think it covers what most people need out of a car. It's got tons of storage space. It's got the charging. It's got low cost to entry. It's got the range. It's got the decent charging speeds. Yeah, work smarter, not harder. Exactly. So efficiency is just another way of saying it's smart. So like that's why I choose the MacBook that I have. It has the most efficient silicon available. It uses a fraction of the energy that a PC would use to perform the same way with video editing and exporting and even live streaming like I am right now. I would be using 2 or 3 times as much energy if I was doing this live stream on a PC. So even every little bit counts, it stacks up over time. And I'm hopeful. There's some big loans that Aptera has applied for, both at the state and federal level. They got a pretty big $21 million state grant, and they've applied for a federal grant that could give them several hundred millions of dollars. So at this point, I could be wrong, but especially after seeing Nikola make it this far. We all said Nikola was a scam and Nikola was ridiculous and Nikola would never go anywhere and Trevor Milton was just this convicted guilty scam artist. And then they still, after firing Milton, were able to make vehicles and deliver them. They've delivered semi-trucks. Sure, they're maybe not the best semi-trucks. I don't think they're better than the Tesla Semi or what have you, but they did deliver a product. And they're still around, Their stock is tanked heavily, and there's not a lot of people that are investing in them. There's not a lot of people that think they have that big a chance, or that, they're not going to be too disruptive, but they're still around. They're still making stuff. They're still employing people. And now the more recent bit of news, which I never thought would happen, Faraday Future has actually started production. Faraday Future has been around since forever. There was people working on Faraday Future back in 2016, making these, luxury SUVs or whatever. And, they went under and then got bought out and then got saved and then came back and then said they would return and then didn't. And it's been a long, windy road. But even after all of that bankruptcy and stock tanking and acquisitions and everything, they still made it to production. They're still here. And a lot of people said Lucid wouldn't make it to production because their finances were so bad and it was going to be really hard to make a car with that much range and that good efficiency. Here they are. I didn't think they would make it this far, to be honest, and I still think Lucid is struggling with demand problems and profitability, but the Saudis keep pouring billions into them. They're still chugging along. So I feel like it's right and it's reasonable to assume that, not all of these EV startups can make it. Just statistically, we know that not all automakers survive. But maybe we underestimated how a lot of them would perform based on a lot of the investors in our world today being willing to invest in startups. Like the willingness to try to get more electric vehicle companies off the ground have been able to push for more investment. I don't think Lucid is a good investment based on how they're struggling to find buyers and their vehicles already aren't profitable and everyone's asking them to lower prices and they can't. It's not a good situation, but there's still people dumping billions into them. They still believe in them. They still want them to succeed. And we have a very passionate, very large Aptera community that is still growing and getting lots of more people excited by the day. I think just government funding and crowdfunding will probably get them to production. And I think Aptera has a better shot at profitability than any other startup because they get to use much more simplified manufacturing processes, much smaller battery packs per car, much better margins than anybody else. Yeah, Lordstown started production. They're not doing well. I think they recalled the 50 cars they delivered, but they're still here. They're not dead. Like, maybe it's harder to kill these EV startups than we thought, I think 5 years ago, there were a lot of Tesla bulls saying that all these startups wouldn't survive and they couldn't make it, but a lot of them are still hanging out. They're still chugging along. So Aptera being as smart as they are and as efficient as they are, and they're running their business with as low overhead as possible and, not paying for things they don't need and being very cautious with their spending. I was like, if anybody is going to make it, I would say it's Aptera. I mean, Rivian has a great shot at success, mostly just because they have huge tech money. Amazon is investing a ton of money into them and they have a ton of demand. They're not making a lot of money. Rivian is like burning more money than I think anybody right now. But they have so much cash in the bank that they can kind of get away with it. So I think Rivian has a very, very high chance of success, even though they're, in a tough position right now. But they just have so much funding from existing contracts, and they are, unlike Lucid, they do not have a demand problem. Rivian's vehicles are awesome, and tons of people want to buy them, and there's a huge long line. It's probably the longest line for any vehicle in production right now. Like, if you order a Rivian today, you probably won't get it for like 2 years, which is kind of crazy. As much as I hate inefficient EVs, I'm loving the recent rise in competitors for Tesla, even though they use CCS. It's cool to see them get better, but yeah, I still think you only get the benefits of competition when you get like actually good competition. And because they're all still using CCS and a lot of them still have poor software implementation, they're not really great competitors because who's going to buy that over a Tesla, Like, it's not going to convince that many people to stop buying Teslas. I know nothing about the Willow project. I apologize. Maybe you guys need to fill me in on that. I've read nothing about it. I have no idea. Do I believe the U.S. banks are strong and resilient? No. It's not really an EV subject, but uh, I don't think they ever were. But now more than ever, no, I don't think they're. I haven't followed the banking drama very closely, but it seems bad, and that's why I don't store much money in banks. I store more of my net worth in the stock market and real estate and other things other than. I just don't think it's a good idea in general to just sit on a bunch of cash, really. Uh, Unless you want to keep it like locally, like physical cash instead of in a bank. But um, yeah, it's kind of scary to think you could go to your bank account one day and it just wouldn't be there. Um, Discovered Rivian chargers at Bar Lake State Park, northeast of Denver, supposedly coming to all Colorado state parks. Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, my friends was in Colorado recently, and he saw a ton of Rivians out there. I think that the Rivian ethos in Colorado just go hand in hand. It's just like a very Rivian-centric state in general. Um, let's see. One idea for charging for Tesla in a robotaxi case is at a charging location have Optimus to plug and unplug cars, no retrofit needed. I think that would be far more expensive than just a robo arm, personally. Just a couple of actuators that just and then plug in. I think a whole humanoid robot that has to stand on two legs and walk around, and then vandalism. And I don't want to get too much into it, but I think the Tesla bot will be one of Tesla's biggest missteps of all time. Like I just genuinely don't see it going anywhere. Like after it's been almost 3 years since full self-driving beta launched. Can you guys believe that? It was 2020 when they rolled out the first beta, where it was like, full self-driving is doing turns. It can go through a roundabout and what have you. 3 years later, and it's still like, okay, it's way better than it was, sure. But has Tesla assumed any more liability at all? None. No. Like, if anything, we've lost some of those cases. Now they're tracking your eyes and they want your hands on the wheel. We have still made zero progress in terms of, okay, you don't have to pay attention or anything like that. And it still makes mistakes and people still have to overtake it. And I just read a tweet today, someone on the latest FSD beta that was like, wow, it's really cool. It's getting better, but also it ran several stop signs and it brakes way too hard and doesn't get out of the lane at the right time and it doesn't read these signs. So it's like 3 years later and you can't even manage like the road system. Tesla bot is trying to handle just, walking around, interacting with things, grabbing things, putting them down. Like, so complicated. Like, infinitely more edge cases than driving. And driving has a lot of edge cases. I see their videos of bot walking around and look at how flimsy it is and how slow it is. And I'm like, okay, I don't think this is going to be replacing any jobs that quickly. I mean, I know they showed a video of it at a factory, but it's like grabbing these things out really slowly. And I'm just like, okay. Yeah, Elon said they could do something similar when the Model 3 production line was coming online. He said they wanted to make this like alien dreadnought factory that was all automated and there was like no people. And even back then, Elon said humans are underrated. Actually, it ended up being way more complicated, and now there's way more people involved with the production than there was going to be. Yeah, I think he's way too obsessed with the Tesla bot, to be honest. I don't see the development of a humanoid robot going any faster than robotaxis, and robotaxis have taken like way longer than Elon thought. So if the robotaxis are taking way longer than he thought, then I think the bot will take even longer than he thinks, even longer than that. I remember him saying they would do a coast-to-coast drive with a Tesla with no interventions in 2017. And then in 2018, talking about Autonomy Day and how they would have reverse summon and the car would be able to come out and drop you off and then find a parking space and then come back, and so many promises. And then in 2019 they said they would have 1 million robotaxis by 2020. Obviously, that didn't happen. AI Day said, well, maybe by next year we should have this done. And then in 2022, he was on the record several times saying, like, I know I've said this a lot of times, and I know it's kind of a joke, but I feel extremely confident that by the end of this year we're going to have level 4, level 5 robotaxis, and it didn't happen. So I'm just like so skeptical with any regard to autonomous driving robotaxi stuff because of how long it's taken. Every tiny little step has taken way longer than expected. Basically, there's no shortcuts with self-driving. There's never like okay, well, adding that was easy. It was like, no. Every tiny little thing you want to add is going to take 10 times longer than you expect. No, reverse summon has never been available. FSD keeps getting better consistently. It hasn't hit a progress bar yet. Yeah, but what I described it on in the podcast is it's like watching a snail climb a mountain. And you're like, you're watching this snail climb a mountain, and after 3 years, it's like, wow, you made it 200 feet. Look how much further you are from the bottom. Look at how far it went. But it's like, okay, does that mean it's close to being done? No. It's still got like thousands of feet to go. And I think that with driving, it's very deceptive because the vast majority of driving is pretty simple, but it's those edge cases that you need a human for that are darn near impossible for a computer to get right. And I watched the videos. I'm watching the same ones you are. I've experienced. Mike has FSD beta. I've ridden in the car too. Yeah, it's still not anywhere close. I will admit that maybe we're getting closer if we get level 3, but it's been 3 years and we haven't moved from level 2. Level 3, I think, is an inevitable step, and we'll probably be in level 3 for several years before we get to level 4, but can't even get to that yet. They still want me to pay attention. They still want me to keep my hand on the wheel. They get mad because I'm not holding my hand on the wheel just the right amount, you know? Like, if it's taking this long to just get level 3, I have very little hope for level 4. It's just... I used to, you know, if you asked me back in 2019, I would have been like, oh yeah, it's just around the corner. I watched Autonomy Day. They explained how the neural net training will work and all that, and it's going to get better over time with updates. And yeah, it's just around the corner. Maybe it takes an extra year or two. But now, after all the timelines that have been missed, and from what I can tell, there's a lot of software updates where it'll get better in one area and worse in another. There's a lot of one step forward, 2 steps back, and I think that creates all kinds of problems for robotaxis because it's never really going to be done. Tesla's constantly going to be trying to improve it, but what happens if they try to improve it and that fixes one problem, but then it creates a new one somewhere else? And that can make it more dangerous, and then they turn it off. You know, when a human makes a mistake while driving, causes a crash or, you know, hits somebody or something, usually if they're at fault, there's a repercussion for it. You know, they can get penalized. They have to, you know, sometimes if you get pulled over for speeding or whatever, you got to go to traffic court, or you can get your license revoked if you were, you know, drinking and driving and that kind of thing. There's all kinds of due process to take down or like make sure that someone doesn't keep making that same mistake. If you have one batch of code driving thousands and thousands of cars, and they just consistently keep making the same mistake at the same interchange, and several robotaxis crash in the same place, they're going to have to pull that back. They're going to have to recode it for that area and turn it off there, and then patch it there and hope that it, you know, learns from that in a new place. Every car is running its own model of FSD. I mean, it's experiencing different roadways, but no, I'm not entirely convinced that they like code them entirely differently. I just think that you set yourself up for so much disappointment because I think this is a defense tactic by me personally. The reason I'm so skeptical on robotaxis is because I don't want to get my hopes up unnecessarily again, because I have, but then been proven wrong. So if you've been proven wrong, so like 4 years in a row on how close we are to robotaxis, your brain just kind of naturally doesn't retain that hope. Your brain is just kind of like, yeah, I don't think this is as close as we think. And why does the claims that we're closer today mean more than the claims that we were closer 4 years ago? Why does that matter more? I'm trying to say, like, FSD can get a lot better than it is today and still not be good enough for robotaxis. There's a big wall. There's a big journey that it still has to take. Um, and I think level 3 self-driving is awesome. I would love to just be able to relax in the car. Level 3 essentially means that you have to be in the driver's seat, but you don't have to pay attention. Level 4 is when you don't have to be in the driver's seat anymore. Um, and the fact that we can't even get the basics of it like that. I said 2030 before, and now I say 2027 for level 4. Okay, I'm just saying. I've seen people time and time again proven wrong. And I mean, if it ever happens, I guess eventually it might you'll be right. But they've been, even so, I would be happily proven wrong. Like, to me, it's not going to be that bad a thing if I go, okay, actually full self-driving was way better than I thought, and robotaxis are now available. Like, I'm not too worried about saying that. I'm not too worried about saying, yeah, I was wrong on how soon robotaxis are. But I would rather be wrong on that than expect it to come and anticipate it and tell everybody that it's just around the corner and then be proven wrong over and over and over and over again. I'd rather be proven wrong once than like 5 times, I guess. Yeah, I just can't. I can't keep staying excited for it when there's this little improvement or this little change in the overall performance. It's still like, okay, yeah, it did that corner pretty good, and then it did that turn. Oh, wait, I gotta take over. Tried to drive over a person or ran a couple stop signs. It's like, okay, 3 years later, here we are, hoping for the next update, and then we wait 6 months for some other hype word. Oh, single stack or V12, that'll change everything. And Elon says it's coming next week, and then it takes 6 months to come out. I just following this whole, that's what Elon said, and I think it's getting better. I think it's better. I think it's better, and then it's not, and then yeah, it's not fun to me. It's not exciting. It's like everybody getting together and dropping $15,000 on this beta code that makes everyone uncomfortable in the car. That's why so many people testing FSD beta have to do it by themselves, because it makes their wife uncomfortable. It makes their kids uncomfortable. That's why Randy just doesn't even use full self-driving anymore, just because it makes his family uncomfortable. And you spend all this money on self-driving tech that makes everyone anxious and nervous, which is like, great, wonderful, after all these years. Marngel says, self-driving cars are overrated. I doubt they'll fix most issues we have with cars and driving today, like congestion, even if Tesla gets it correct to full level 5 self-driving. I think in major cities it will probably reduce car ownership, but yeah, I've been lied to way too many times with the timelines to think that there's this magical update where one day we're going to suddenly have cars that can drive 10 times safer than a human. It's like, I want that to happen, but seeing what has happened, I just can't believe that is coming anymore. Like, everything's always been compromised or not quite what they said it was, or actually we had to tweak it to make it more scalable or profitable. I could see them turning it into, I'm a bit worried actually that they might turn it into all hardware 3 vehicles cap out at level 2 self-driving. And it's just basically what it is now. FSD beta does an okay job driving you around. Still kind of awkward, still has to be disengaged from time to time, but that's the peak. That's what hardware 3 gets. But then hardware 4, with its better computer, better cameras, better visibility, maybe that can achieve level 3. And then everybody on hardware 3 is like, wait, how do we get to hardware 4? And they go, oh, sorry, we've delivered full self-driving to you. You're like, what about the robotaxis? And it was like, we technically never promised that. If you read the fine print, Elon was just being Elon, and you can sue him if you want, but he can afford it. So, I realized you have moved on, but I went back, and the only point I agree with you is that debris is a big issue for wireless charging. Did you miss the whole point about adding more complexity to the car, adding to the overall cost, and the reason that people are struggling to sell EVs profitably, and that adding more to the cost is not going to help EV adoption? Tire costs are the real advantage of an Aptera robotaxi. Everything about EV has a clear path to getting cheaper over time, except tires. That's a good point, yeah. I think Goodyear has some plans to do some tires that should last longer, but it's all just plans at this point. Alpha says it's impossible to actually get it perfect because there'll always be a case where it can fail. This mountain has no peak. Yeah, and I also just think it's sketchy to have one stack of code that's controlling that many vehicles, you know. Humans aren't perfect either, but there's not one human driving tens of thousands of cars. And there's so many just edge cases of construction zones and driveways and gravel and things running out and ultrasonic. The Tesla Vision only cars can't even recognize cardboard for park assist and stuff. There's like really basic things that it's still missing out on. And I don't know. Many major cities will probably ban single occupant robotaxi. In places like San Francisco, every robotaxi will be a robo carpool to reduce congestion. Well, that's practically just a bus, but yeah, I get what you mean. And this will solve this issue. If it does happen, I don't agree it will add much complexity. Well, what? Again, I keep asking you the same question. Why hasn't anybody done it? And your motivation is, well, someone will figure it out and someone will magically make it cheaper somehow. Okay, why has no one done it? Why has no one pursued it? This is technology that's not new. Inductive charging has existed for over a decade now. It's always been possible to put on the car, but they don't do it. Why? I'm waiting. I'm still waiting. But yeah, the lower tire cost of the Aptera, I think, is kind of a nice added benefit. Even if you need to replace the tires, which you probably need to replace the Aptera tires less because the vehicle isn't as heavy. But even when you do, that'll cost less than a full car. Roman says by the end of the decade, FSD Robotaxi will be here. Okay, but like, you could argue that we've had robotaxis for years in limited form. Like Google Waymo has been around for several years. So what, to me, like saying, okay, robotaxis could be here, to me, that could mean there's like 15 robotaxis in San Francisco that Tesla owns and operates. Does that mean, okay, they've achieved full self-driving? I guess, but if it's so problematic and there's so many issues, just like Cruise is having with their robotaxis in San Francisco and Tesla's slow to roll it out, kind of like how they're slow to roll out everything. Has that really been achieved? Like, you know, because Tesla bulls hype it up like with the robotaxi network, that's going to exponentially jump the profitability of the company. But if it's a fleet of like less than 1,000 cars, is that going to put a major impact on their revenue stream? Nicolette, we chose inductive charging not because it's easy, but because it's hard. Those materials are too expensive. 8 kilowatts has been done by many suppliers, but OEMs aren't interested for said reasons. Current cost and inefficiency. Okay, that. And your solution is, well, they will just figure that out somehow. How are they going to lower the cost? How are they going to improve the efficiency? They just will. They'll figure it out. That's not great motivation, in my opinion. When the companies that are performing best in the EV space are the ones that have reduced cost, reduced complexity, prioritized efficiency, not prioritized inefficiency. You'd think like at least someone would have adopted some light version of it by now, right? Like Lucid could have their wireless charger, but no, even Lucid doesn't want to do it. Ford is losing money on all their EVs. VW probably is too. Tesla's the only one profitable, and they're taking out ultrasonic sensors that cost $100. And you're saying they're going to find a way to incorporate wireless charging or something? Like, inductive charging and self-driving cars are perfect for airports with fixed routes. Well, I agree that the car being able to charge without a human is a good idea. I just don't think the inductive charging is the cheapest way to, or most efficient way to do that. Inductive charging highways is like extremely stupid. The cost of that would be astronomical, and the amount of energy your car uses at highway speeds is nowhere close to what the inductive chargers can give off. And those charging coils would be all online, all in a row. Think of how much money that would cost to cover. Just 1 mile would be like $1 billion of wiring. Hoping material science gets better for wireless charging to become mainstream is not a good sign for the future of the tech. Yeah, I agree. It's like once the tech was available on smartphones, it was incorporated fairly quickly, and now it's kind of a standard thing. But it's existed for cars for years, and no one's added it. And just saying, well, one day it'll get better. It's like the same logic with carbon nanotubes. People said that we'd be able to make a space elevator by, well, right now we can only build very, very limited amounts of carbon nanotubes. But over time, technology will get magically cheaper and it'll scale faster. It's like, does it? No, sometimes things just don't scale. Same thing with hydrogen fuel cell. Inductive charging is getting more and more efficient. A mechanical arm to plug in a charger is too much room to fail. I think it's the opposite. I think the mechanical arm is not that different from what we have now. It's just replacing a human arm with a mechanical arm. The problem with inductive charging is not just the efficiency. That's been my point from the beginning. Yes, the inefficiency is one problem, but the next one is the complexity it adds to the vehicle. No vehicle on the road has the hardware for it. So adding it is going to increase heat, which makes it harder to cool. It's going to push the battery packs inside to the interior further. And there's debris and mud and ice that collects on the bottom of the vehicle, which eats into the efficiency. I just think there's a good reason that it hasn't been incorporated yet. And if it does get incorporated, it will probably be on very, very high-end luxury cars, not something that everyday people can afford and buy. Most people don't even use the wall connector, and that's $500. An at-home wireless charger is probably going to be like $2,000. For reference, Aptera uses a tire originally made for a Fiat, which is a half price of a Model Y tire, but Aptera weight per tire is less than that of the Fiat. There you go. So even replacing all of the Aptera tires will be like less than half the price of replacing a Model 3 or Y. It'll probably get like 70,000 plus miles out of each set of tires. That would be awesome. I really hope that's true. Let's say a vehicle such as Aptera, how fast would it charge if you went over this topic already? Sorry, just joined. Well, what is it charging off of? Are you saying from wireless charging or from solar? With solar in a sunny climate, I think you would get, they say around 40 miles of range per day. So it wouldn't charge very quickly. It'd be a trickle charge. But if you're just plugging in the Aptera to a 110 outlet, that would get like 10 to 13 miles per hour, which is way faster than any other vehicle off of a 110 outlet. If you plugged it into like a NEMA 1450, you'd be getting I want to say 60 or 70 miles an hour, which is pretty dang quick. If every charger had a mechanical arm, just imagine how much servicing that would require. Moving parts automatically mean less reliable. No, I wasn't suggesting every charger. I meant for a home charger. But think of the expense of adding inductive chargers. First of all, no one was pitching inductive charging for DC fast charging. That's like they said earlier. In a lab, they maxed it out at 8 kilowatts. That's nowhere near what a supercharger would get. I don't think anyone was suggesting that. The suggestion of wireless charger is more like overnight slow passive charging, in which case it wouldn't be every supercharger. It would just be one you install in replacement of a wall connector. You install it once for your garage, and that's it. I don't think wireless charging would be feasible for any kind of quick charge. Imagine just sleeping your way through an entire road trip, and if the car needs to charge, it automatically backs up into the charger, and then arm locates and starts charging while you're just chilling. Yeah, I like the concept of being able to plug in without getting out. I just don't think the inductive charging is the best way to go about that, because it requires new vehicles that don't exist and new hardware that doesn't exist, and the efficiency won't be very good. And I think that just having one charge port when you're transmitting that much energy, just putting it in one place is probably your best bet. It will only be relevant in predictable, not so variable environments, say a place where it doesn't rain or freeze much. Yeah, I'm not saying it will never exist, but I could see like wireless charging becoming about as common as battery swapping. NIO does battery swapping, but it's not like the mainstream. That's not what most people are doing. So it's like, yeah, a couple people might incorporate it, but I don't think it's a good idea. A Tesla level 2 charger on a 100 amp circuit can output 20 kilowatts. Imagine a 15 kilowatt hour Aptera with no solar on it can get 60 watt hours per mile. That's 250 miles of range and a full charge on a level 2 in 45 minutes. I don't know if a battery pack that small could maintain 20 kilowatts for very long. It would probably taper off as it gets higher. But in general, Tony, yes, I agree with you. That's one of the many perks of the Aptera having a hyper efficient battery pack, is you can charge it with not much current and get it up really quickly. A robotaxi future still needs something to plug the charger in automatically, and Arbon needs servicing. Inductive charging, while less efficient, is still probably cheaper to run at mass scale. I'm not so convinced, because with a robotaxi, time is money. The faster you can charge it, the faster you get it back out on the road, and wireless charging is the opposite of fast. 8 kilowatts at best, that's going to mean many, many hours of the vehicle sitting around not making money, not getting rides. And I still think it'll need service regardless. I'm not pushing for the automatic arms. I think robotaxi has all kinds of problems personally, but we talked about earlier in the stream the suggestion of incentivizing riders to plug in the car for them. You say, hey, do you mind if you, on your route, can you stop by this supercharger and plug in this low charge robotaxi, and then we'll credit you a ride. We'll give you a discount, or you'll get a free ride or something. Letting the riders help maintain the network with incentivization would probably be much cheaper than putting out all these wireless charging mats everywhere, which are slow and inefficient. Are you going to reduce distance between the vehicle and the charger? That's true. I own 2 sites with 4 inductive charging plates at 75 kilowatts. Taxi use those. What? Tag me on Twitter with those cars and those sites. I've never heard of this. You know how many robotaxis a dude can plug in and unplug in an hour? They talk about putting too much mustard on the hot dog. That's true. It'd probably be cheaper to just have a guy at the supercharger to plug them in than it would be to wait around for all of them to charge at like 8 kilowatts or whatever. Battery swapping, all that added cost and complexity to save 10 minutes. Yeah, pretty much. I don't think it's a good idea, but anyway, it's getting late. Maybe I'm wrong. Well, I guess time will tell. God, it kills me when you're like, I don't think 75 kilowatts wireless. That doesn't sound right. But like you're telling me that the little robotic arm would be too complicated, too many moving parts to service, but then the Tesla bot isn't too complicated? That'd be like a $20,000 robot that anyone can just push over at any moment. At least I could picture a little robotic. Honestly, I don't think it would be that complicated. Even though there's a few moving parts, it's not on the vehicle, it's on the charger. And just picture like the little actuators that you can find in like a $100 gimbal, like the smartphone gimbals that stabilize your phone. Just like those little actuators, and like you can overpower it, you can grab it and move it around and it just goes limp and you can just put it back in place. But I do not see that failing all that often, to be honest. The localities will probably regulate that you can only load and unload people at a charging station. The passengers will plug and unplug. Maybe, but there's so many obstacles in the way of robotaxis. I think this is way down the road. I'm just thinking of the fire risk from the wireless charger. It's the biggest concern. Usually there's not a risk of fire, but the excess heat is definitely going to add a lot more cost and complexity to the vehicle itself. When you're charging battery packs and have charging coils that big. I like the idea of kind of crowdsourcing the charging of the robotaxis. It'd just be like, hey, you want to go from here to here. There's a robotaxi that needs to be plugged in here. Or maybe there's 5 robotaxis that need to be plugged in. So they say, hey, we'll pay you $1 for everyone you plug in if you're willing to stop here. We'll cover the price of the ride. I think that would probably be the simplest, cheapest way. It would just be a few lines of code. Tesla bots can replace themselves. I'm not convinced a Tesla bot can walk on flat ground yet. I don't think that would be any simpler or cheaper. Only one needed per station instead of per stall. Again, I think Elon's target for the bot was still going to be like $10,000 to $15,000. Like 10 robo arms, I think, would cost like $5,000 personally, or $6,000. It's not that complicated technology. It doesn't have to balance itself constantly. Then you got to charge the bot. The bot has to plug into something. Yeah, no. Anyway, I think we've got a long ways to go till then, but I appreciate your guys' insight. I love the discussion. I love when people disagree. Google Volvo Goatborg energy inductive charging. Okay, please do tag me. I want to check that out. I think the human shape is not very practical. Excess heat could cause fires if anything combustible finds its way on that charger. I think you need a spark for a fire. I don't think heat alone would do it. But thank you all for watching, and I hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Bye-bye.